Welcome back to True Geordie Podcast. Today's guest is Mohammed Hijab Ali Dawah, who is just, we're waiting on him, but he'll be here. He's on the way. Thanks for coming, bro.
Thank you very much for having me.
I appreciate it. It's funny, I've been recommended a lot of people to talk to, and your name was right at the very top of the list.
Naturally.
No, truth be told, because and when I watched your videos, I was like, okay, I get this, because I like your style. You just had Jordan Peterson on. You ask good questions. You talk about a lot of the same topics as me, but you come at it from obviously a different angle. And with everything I've been through lately, having someone like yourself on, I really appreciate it, mate.
Thank you very much.
So, elephant in the room.
Yeah.
How was it for you viewing the situation and having, you are one of the leaders in the Muslim community. How did you feel that went down?
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, I was sent the video where you and Lawrence were speaking and stuff like that. And obviously it was very distasteful. I think you've obviously come to that realization, not least because it's just one of those stereotypes that people have just, Muslim community have had to learn to live with for so long. And it does have an impact on their practical lives. But also, I think a lot of what the frustration of the Muslim community is about is that if it were other communities, the ramifications may have been much worse. So, for example, we believe that, for instance, when it comes to the kind of protected characteristics, because in this country you've got the Equalities Act, say, for example, right?
Okay.
So one of those is like religion, yeah? One of the 9, I think, protected characteristics. That Muslims sometimes get the short end of the straw. And so, for instance, if I were to make a joke about the Jewish community, for example, about the Holocaust and stuff like that, there would be almost no guarantee of no second chance. Now, what I'm saying is that this opens up a question about the extent to which freedom of speech should be operational in society. I think the UK has its own boundaries because we've got hate speech laws here, for example. In America, it's, I think, a little bit more wide in so much as it's more difficult to sue someone for defamation of character or libel. And they take, you know, the constitutional rights, I think, more, if you want to put it this way, ideologically kind of as an imperative for themselves, culturally. But still yet, the main criticism that would probably be put forward is there's an inconsistency in the way that certain things are being operationalized in the United Kingdom. So, for example, if I were to speak about certain groups, that there would be more of a backlash than other groups, as I just mentioned. So I think that's where a lot of the frustration is. I think it's important to have clear guidelines, for example, in a country where you say these are the limits of freedom of speech. If there are any limits, of course, that's where the discussion should be. Should there be limits? To what extent should there be limits of freedom of speech? And once you've understood that, okay, these are limits of freedom of speech, then what are the consequences of someone doing X, Y, Z, or going against this protected, or these people with protected characteristics? So I think that's where the frustration is. For example, to put it in a nutshell, people will say that if this was said about these groups of people, this person would have been deplatformed. So that kind of thing.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, but I definitely felt some of what you said, even from experiencing it, you know, as the person who said the wrong thing, and it felt like I'm going to try and make sense of it in my own way, and hopefully I don't butcher this, but you know. For example, sometimes you've had a really hard day at work and it's long and you're fucking miserable and you just wish, you know, I can't be arsed with this. The boss said something to me, I'm really fed up. And then you go home and maybe your other half says something that's almost like the tipping point, and you lash out at that person because they've upset you or hurt you, but it's not just about that. It's about everything else. And kind of what you've just said is, for me, on the receiving end of a lot of the anger that I've caused, I feel like there's a lot more to this. There's a lot of deeper issues here. And obviously I've made the mistake, and I'm very sorry for that, and I want you to know that. But also, I can feel that the Muslim people who've reached out to me in a lot of the sincerity that they have done, they're fed up. And they're sick of feeling like we don't matter. It seems that way, or not as much as you've said, other people would be protected or defended.
No, I mean, I think the issue is bigger than any personality, for example, yourself or me or something. What I'm trying to get at here is that, say, for example, there's two aspects of freedom of speech, right? There's the legalistic aspect, and then you can say there's the institutional aspect. Yeah? So there are the laws. There's the Freedom of Speech Act, for example, right? Which allows you to say certain things so long as it's not hate speech, incitement to violence or whatever. And then you have major institutions or organizations, companies like YouTube, for example, which we're both on, who have like community guidelines. And they say, I'm sure you're aware, like if you speak about a minority group or any particular group and you have hate speech, then you get a community strike, for example. You see, so the point is you've got two aspects of freedom of speech. One of them is a legalistic one. Another one is you can call it a company or institutional one or whatever it is. Obviously, there's one layer of problem. The first layer of problem is that with the institutional one, like for example, YouTube and so on, they're not elected. So obviously the YouTube elites, whoever's making decisions on behalf of YouTube are not elected. So there's a democratic aspect here, which is how is it the case that something as big as YouTube institutionally, who have as much power to enact freedom of expression and speech, are not elected, and they could have more power and sway than, say, a government would. So that's the first aspect. Secondly, the fear is, and this is why I'm saying it's a bigger issue than just me and you.
Of course.
The fear is, if they are unelected and they are acting arbitrarily in regards to community guidelines and cancellation and these kinds of things, if they act arbitrarily, for example, so as to deplatform, say, person X, Andrew Tate, whoever it may be, completely remove him from the platform, and not do so with person Y, okay? The question is, how are we meant to feel safe on this platform? Because if the guidelines are not very clearly identifiable, how are we meant to? So I can say something one day about person X or person Y or people X or people Y, which the YouTube elites will define as hate speech, and then they can remove me from the platform. I think this is really problematic because, number one, they don't have a mandate. They don't have legitimacy from that perspective, democratic legitimacy. Number two, even if they did have a mandate, they are not operating on a consistent basis with all parties.
Well, I don't know whether they are consistent or they're not, but I would assume they're not because they're run by people and people are flawed.
Yeah.
And when you say, obviously, they're not elected, obviously it's a company, they run it, and for that reason, they won't be elected. One thing I do think that there are differences in, and this isn't me defending myself.
Yeah, of course.
Because there's nothing to defend. I was wrong. End of story. But I think in some cases, I think the reason there are differences in how people are dealt with is previous character, intent, whether or not people meant what they said in the way that it has been absorbed. Because sometimes, and this isn't, again, me talking about me personally, I'm talking generally, what someone might say, how we interpret that is often dependent on our previous life experiences. So, for example, to use my example, if we're going to go there, some people might look at me and have their own preconceptions and say, well, does it matter whether he intended to hurt us or not? What matters is he said it and this is how it's making me feel. How do you think, and this might not be nice for me to hear, but I think it's important to have the conversation, how do you think it made just an ordinary Muslim feel when the comment made in the way it was said?
To be honest with you, I mean, I think that obviously it came across, people were angry, right? Because this is the kind of stereotype that we don't want to be associated with. I mean, for example, if we look at it on a statistical basis, those Muslims who support this kind of terrorism, like there have been polls that have been done, for example, Pew Research have done polls and seen how many people support terrorism and so on. It's negligible. It's like, it's a negligible amount. The overwhelming proportion of Muslims obviously don't have those views about suicide bombing or about killing or about whatever. And so to continually being associated with that will make people angry. But as I say, I think there's a secondary issue. And I don't want to keep mentioning the point, but the secondary issue is it makes people upset and resentful and angry, including myself, that, and this is not really about you in a sense.
No, I know, mate.
It's about how the system is operating. That on the one hand, if I say certain things, even if I say certain things about the state of Israel, for example, okay, I believe that the state of Israel is operating on an immoral and unethical basis, for example, yeah? But if I go further in this and talk about the legitimacy of the state of Israel, I could be accused of anti-Semitism, and if I'm accused of anti-Semitism strongly enough, then I could be deplatformed, just like certain people were deplatformed recently. The point is that when people see that the system is not being consistent, or there is not consistent application of cancellation, okay, if you want to put it that way, or removal, or then people get more angry. So the point is I feel that we have to have a stance as to the extent to which we can offend people. Okay, so if our stance is...
The problem with that, though, is who defines what is offensive, and that each own individual is kind of based on what you feel and think and what your life experience is. And unfortunately, as you've rightly pointed out, that's up to the platform.
That's what I mean.
The person who runs the platform.
For example, like there have been people like Andrew Tate and others that have been deplatformed, completely removed from the platform. Me as a Muslim person who speaks on behalf of Islam or speaks on behalf of the Muslim community or speaks on behalf of myself or has Islamic sentiments, I'll be honest, I'm anxious that one day someone's going to come from the elites in the YouTube and say, you know what, this guy's gone too far in terms of anti-normative ethics. He's gone too far.
Well, you've been accused a little bit of that.
Yeah. But they haven't removed me.
You had an issue with, you made a comment about a small amount of people who were they Sikh?
Oh, the Hindu.
Sorry, my bad. Sorry, Hindu.
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll go down well. But the point is I was watching one of your videos where you who criticised a small violent minority of Hindu people. What were they called again? That you said?
Hindutva.
Sorry, I'm going to butcher a lot of things in this podcast, but I'm trying. And I felt it was interesting watching you in a situation where you were going, whoa, I was talking about
these people,
a minority in a big group of people, and people were misrepresenting what you'd said.
Exactly.
And it could happen to anyone.
So, for example, if in this podcast you start speaking badly, as I would as well, about ISIS or some Al Qaeda or something like that, some organization which does that. The Hindutva and the RSS, some of its leaders, like the second leader of the RSS, which is connected to this particular thing, praised the Holocaust, and he said we need a new Holocaust. So when I come out against these people and it's conflated with anti-Hinduism, I'm saying this is anti-Hindutva. I'm against the Hindutva. And they say, you're attacking Hinduism. This is a clear example of, okay, so you're maligning me. What's the next step? You're going to deplatform me now. And so...
People were deliberately misinterpreting you, though.
Yes.
And that is also where cancellation can also be used as a weapon.
Yeah.
Where... Look, when I looked at what people were saying about me, I felt like they were the genuine people I'd hurt and sincerely were being really... forthcoming, and there were people who were non-Muslim who had also hurt and upset, who were disappointed in me. But there are the cynical people out there who maybe just love to, like, I watched, you ever seen Monty Python's Life of Brian by any chance, right? Well, it's a religious comedy where it pokes fun at the Bible. But they have these stonings where people turn up for a stoning. They don't care why they're stoning the person they're stoning. They just love a stoning. And I've got no doubt in the power you have in your community, that some people would just love to take you down. And when it comes to a bit like the stoning situation that I'm referring to, everyone ends up getting cancelled because when
I see that with you, I get anxious. But when I see, even, I'm not sure if Twitch removed you. Did they?
I got a suspension, yeah.
So that actually makes me a bit anxious because I think to myself, who's making these decisions? I'll be honest with you, because if you can get suspended or cancelled or something on these bases, then what we're saying is a lot more anti-normative, if that makes sense. The other thing is that, for example, with the removal, I keep mentioning this, but of Andrew Tate from the platform, that for me was a red flag. It really was a red flag, because there's people in the community, like the Muslim community, who have seen these so-called ex-Muslims, some anti-Muslims who claim to be ex-Muslims, right, who have burnt the Quran, eaten it, spat it out, and these kinds of things, and offended Muslims, made fun of them, and they're still on the platform. So the question is, who gets to choose? Who's making these decisions? And the arbitrary nature of cancellation, this is, I think, one of the biggest problems of the. Do
you not think, though, that cancellation, a lot of it is down to the level of interest. So, for example, if I had 100,000 subscribers and I made the same joke or same comment that I made, rather, people would not care as much.
I think so.
And I'm sure the guy who you're referring to, who did what he did to the Quran, if he had 2 million subscribers,
good point,
it would be different.
But then that's another point. So I think you're absolutely right here.
Why do we need to have all those subscribers to make the difference?
Exactly. And this is another aspect which is not clearly defined by either the community guidelines or anything resembling terms of use for freedom of speech. So in other words, why is it that there's intentional discrimination against people with more subscribers and less? And where's the threshold? This is not. It's not.
Can I ask your opinion? Because you're obviously making some very good points here about inconsistency.
Yes.
But what I'm more interested in is your personal opinion in terms of, would you rather it be more freedom of speech, more open, more allowance for people to say and do whatever they want, or would you rather more restrictions?
I'll be honest with you, it does, for us as Muslim people, right, the moment it becomes restrictive, especially when what we're saying is anti-normative from the ethical standpoint. When I say that, what I mean is that we're living in a world which is, the dominant ethic is a liberal one, with a small L, right?
Because YouTube is left-leaning, right?
No, I don't mean left with a liberal with a big L. I mean with a small L, meaning it's the philosophical liberalism, the idea that you can, for example, the individual is central, you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anybody else. Almost all Western governments are liberal, every single one of them, right? So the United Kingdom, France, Germany, all of them, United States of America. So because the dominant ethic is liberal with a small L, and what we're saying is a lot of it is anti-liberal, anti-feminist, for example, second-wave feminism, is anti-whatever, it's fill in the blanks. If I were to say to you, we want more restrictions, this will be shooting ourselves in the foot. And nor would we want that for ourselves or other people. But what we're saying is, whatever policies that you have, as in legalistic policies or policies of use, that they should be consistent. So whatever you're applying to me or to you, they should apply to the person that has 1 subscriber, or the person who has 1 million subscribers, or the other person who's a Muslim who's speaking about Jews, or Jews speaking about Muslims. There has to be consistency. And I think that if YouTube starts doing this kind of behavior, where they're removing people, or Twitch or whoever else, it's going to make people like me and you, I'm sure, very anxious about even using the platform.
I hear you. And as much as I'm not really familiar with how much they deplatform people, obviously I don't talk about the guy you mentioned because I've had enough of that. But at the same time,
but it's a case study example.
It's a case study, but it's a very specific one that you've used, and it's not really.
And there's another guy called Sneeko, I think, has been removed as well.
Okay, well, I don't know about that guy, but what I was. If you're a repeat offender with a massive audience, I see why YouTube would be getting a little hot under the collar. This might fuck our money up here, and that may be some cynical reasons as to why he was removed. And but
with that though, bro, let's be completely honest, right? If that's the case, like in your situation, in a sense, like you came out doing an apology and stuff like that, and I think there's many people in the Muslim community are very forgiving, very merciful, and we don't consider you as an enemy of Islam. Like we don't consider you as like.
Thank you very much, by the way.
No, honestly, you've made some jokes and you've apologized for them. There has to be a level of forgiveness and forbearance.
That means a lot. Thank you.
That's something I would put to the Muslim community. Like we have to be merciful. As our Prophet was merciful and our religion is a merciful religion, we have to be merciful with everyone. But what I'm saying is that we have to also be consistent. So in a sense, he's a repeat offender. But once again, the question is, what terms of use, I want to know as a user of YouTube myself, what terms of use did he violate? Because if he violated a very specific term of use, and then he violated 3 times as per the community guidelines, and then there was a clear process that was followed, and then after that there was a decision to remove him, then I would feel a bit more confident in the process. What I'm saying is that there wasn't that process. From what I understand, he wasn't even given 1 community strike. It didn't go from 0 to.
Well, the reason why that. Look, I'm very much hands off with this whole situation now.
But do you see where I'm coming from?
I've moved beyond this silly little beef that I had with him, and I don't care. But there was basically a movement from people who felt that comments were made were abhorrent and were completely against women and other things, and I don't want to go into it because I'm not saying that I believe any of that or agree. I don't want to get involved, but for me, as we said earlier, when the people demand things on a level that they did. And I can only remember one Instagram post that had like God knows how many likes, like millions.
Okay.
And millions of people were like, this must end now. And just to move
but finish this point because it's important.
Yeah.
This is the point.
And I do feel like YouTube and other platforms were they bullied into doing that? I don't know but if there's one thing that I can empathize with this guy on in the last week is companies bow to pressure. They may not necessarily believe what they are doing is right themselves, but if it costs them their bottom line, they will do what they have to save themselves.
No, but here's the thing. I know it's a private company. There's two issues here, and I want to repeat them, right? And I apologize for having to repeat them, but it's important for me. The first issue is this. Freedom of speech is a concept, okay? Who are its upholders? So you have governments, as we've said, right? Governments are its upholders from a legalistic perspective. But then you have institutions as well. Now, YouTube is the first or the second most ranked website, according to, I think it was Elixir before, I'm not sure who does it now, ranking website, right? It probably has more, of 196 countries in the world, it probably has more power to uphold freedom of speech and expression than the vast majority of governments in the world, okay? It has vast power in being able to uphold freedom of speech and expression. Number one, the first issue is, for those who believe in liberal democracies and so on, they are unelected. This is an issue. I mean, because they're elites, they have major power, but they're not elected, and they have power to enact a concept which is ideological and which a state is premised on. The second issue is this, is that now, you say it's a repeat offender, right, for example. However, the issue is this, is that when there is no clear guidelines, let's say, for example, there was pressure from the community, it doesn't say in the YouTube community guidelines, nor does it say in the Instagram community guidelines, that if 1,000, 1 million, or 100 million people come together and sign a petition, okay, that said person can be removed from the platform.
Okay.
You see, so if they had that for example, if that was a clause that they had in their community guidelines, then fine. Then whoever's agreeing to that, as consensual to that.
The only issue is we're debating something where you're saying we have no basis on what he did or how he did it or whatever, but like, I'm sure there are people screaming at the computer screen now watching this saying, well, he did this and he did this and he did this. And let's not act like this guy was Snow White and you know what I mean?
Whatever he did, but the point is Voltaire said it himself, you know, a very famous liberal philosopher. He said that, I'm paraphrasing, but he said that freedom of speech is when you allow the person you hate the most or to say what they want to say.
And I do support that. You know, as much as me and this guy are never going to be friends, I do respect the right of freedom of speech. The problem is YouTube is a company that wants to make money, and that's their goal. They don't give a shit about freedom of speech. They don't give a shit about what me and you think. They want to make money.
No, I get that, but this is important for both of us because if people like me and you, whose a lot of their livelihood is actually based on YouTube, like our livelihood.
Oh, I'd prefer it the way you're saying.
Yes.
I want it to be the Wild West, to be honest with you. The less I have to censor myself, the more money I make. Ever since YouTube started coming down on swearing, every penny has changed. You know, like little things like that. Like the minute you drop an F-bomb, my mates have bleeping out words in their videos. And even that is, to me, ridiculous.
And YouTube allows pornography, right? It's pornography.
It doesn't, but...
you can log in and watch pornography on it?
No, you can't, actually.
Okay.
And I think that's what they are gradually becoming more and more and more censored. Okay. As the years go by, if you look at it 15 years ago and now, it's completely different.
And moreover, like, we're living in... I live in London, right? In the city of London. And a lot of these, they're called drill artists. Yeah. It used to be called grime back in the days. Apparently it's called drill. Now they're literally threatening other people from other postcodes and saying, I'm going to do this and that. And sometimes it actually happens. So the point is once again, goes back to this arbitrariness of like, inconsistencies. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on this.
We talk about cancel culture just generally though.
Yeah,
beyond YouTube.
Yeah.
It is a really interesting phenomenon when you have, like, take my video, for example, however, 1 million views, or tens of thousands of comments, all these messages. What is your take on that? Because I'm sure you've kind of had people target you before.
Yeah, of course. I have it all the time. I'm probably one of the most targeted persons in the UK.
Oh, well, that's great.
Bro, look, I'll be honest with you. Like, I always like somebody. It takes a big man to humble himself, right? And the fact that you did that, you know, is definitely something I consider it to be praiseworthy. The fact that you're having this conversation with me now is praiseworthy. I think this is, I can't see how the Muslim community or any other community can see this in any other way than as a positive thing. Okay, that you're doing this and you're making an effort as one of the probably the most vocal persons and maybe one of the most influential persons in the United Kingdom to outreach to one of the biggest communities now in the United Kingdom, which is the Muslim community. But what I'll say is, I think that if someone comes forward and wants to learn about Islam, for example, about Muslim people, that will be the ultimate kind of test for their genuinity and authenticity in this regard. So, for example, the fact that you're having me now, we're going to speak about probably Islamic themes and what is Islam and how do Muslims connect with it and some of the gender issues that, you know, may make us anti-normative to a lot of people and how do we kind of square the circle and so on. These kinds of things where you're genuinely trying to make an effort to understand, I think that goes way further in the Muslim community because people say, okay, this guy's actually trying to make an effort here.
Yeah, and, you know, without feeling sorry for myself or anything, some of the things that have been accused of me in the last week have been pretty heartbreaking, you know, because I do have close friends who are Muslim, and it's been eye-opening, mate. People call me racist, people call me a lot of different things, and I get it, especially if you don't know me, that clip, it looks fucking terrible. But I think I hope the more people get to know me who haven't previously known me, they will see what's in here. I was wondering specifically, when you're in Islam and you make a mistake, any mistake, whether it could be my mistake or a mistake of an equivalent, what does the Quran teach you as a way of making amends and showing that you are, I guess, sorry and, you know, want to be better?
So if this question is, we need to unpack it a little bit. So for example, as say for example, if a non-Muslim, okay, becomes a Muslim, so in a sense we would consider them to be on the wrong path. For example, if they were non-Muslims, maybe not intentionally, maybe because of society, whatever it may be, but we believe Islam is a true path, and I'll explain why that is in a second. But let's say for example you've got a non-Muslim who becomes a Muslim, so we believe that individual has a clean slate now. And this is mentioned in the Quran, in chapter 25 of the Quran. إِلَّا مَنْ تَابَ وَآمَنَ وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا. Except for the ones who, repent and believe and they do good works, that God will transform all of their bad deeds into good deeds, in fact. So that's one category of people. So converts to Islam are the most honored in that sense because they have, a clean slate. So anything they had done in the past had been completely eradicated and cleaned up.
Is that no matter, because
no matter what they've done.
What if I'd shot a school up and killed a load of kids?
Yeah, even that.
Wow.
Yeah, anything. Any particular thing that you've done, the religion of Islam says, wherever your past is, God is merciful and forgiving, and that he will forgive anything that you have done. Within Islam, the thing that wipes away your sins is repentance. And repentance is just going back to God and asking him for forgiveness. So we always believe there's a second chance. There's no individual whose threshold has been met, that critical mass has been reached, that there is no... There is no second chance for them. We believe every human being has a second chance.
At the end of your videos, or beginning or end, you talk about the charity work that you do.
Yeah.
And you talk about if you do this, you'll be looked upon favorably by God and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it made me wonder, if that is, I don't know, a big part of the psychology that people are signing up for.
I think what it is that Islam fundamentally is Tawheed, which means pure monotheism. To believe there's only one God worthy of worship. Okay, so we don't believe there's a man as God, i.e. in the Christian incarnation theories. We reject that. We don't believe in the Trinity, that the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. We believe only one God who is not a man, is not a woman, is not an animal, is not material, is none of those things. That he's the ultimate creator of the universe, the most knowledgeable, the most powerful, and so on. And that God... he is the only one worthy of worship. Now, you
speak about him and you say, hey, sorry to interrupt you, but you said he's not a man.
Yeah.
Is that normal to say he? I'm not trying to pull you up.
No, it's more it's linguistic convention. You know,
is that easier to digest for people?
I mean, you can say about God that is
It.
I mean, it's not conventional in the translations.
Okay.
But you can say is a thing. God the thing, for example.
That's kind of how I think about it.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's just all-powerful thing. It's an entity, which is an all-powerful thing, which initiated the universe, is maintaining the universe, sustains us. Without this thing, nothing else would be. Okay, so this is our idea of God. That if you remove this as the necessary existence, if you remove this God, that nothing else could instantiate in the universe and so on. This is the all-powerful one. So we say that the purpose of life, the purpose of life is to worship God, which means to take this thing as the ultimate authority. Like in terms of legislation, in terms of veneration, to take this thing as the ultimate authority. So in other words, to say, there's nothing that goes above and beyond this authority, to accept this. If someone accepts this, then they are actualizing, they are manifesting the ultimate purpose of life. Because if I ask, what is the purpose of life to the, say, British audience, everyone's going to come with a subjective purpose. The purpose of life is, for me, it's love, to be loved, or to whatever it may be. But is there a purpose of life? Is there an ultimate purpose of life through all things which are living?
Okay. I need to ask some questions.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
For a start, I've always felt like that. I would say I'm agnostic, but I believe in a great power that is out there that created the universe, and that does, like, to me, just makes perfect sense, to be honest. In terms of, you know, the way you describe the purpose of life to be to worship God, a lot of what I'm understanding of the Muslim religion is that there are almost different interpretations of it depending on where you are and who raised you and all sorts of things. Has your interpretation, as you've gotten older, because I've watched your channel and I see you've evolved, like people who watch this now, they see someone who's a professional guy, but back in the day, I've seen you, you remind me of myself sometimes in certain interviews, and it was I really enjoyed it, like, mate. But I can see a young man who's a bit cocky and a bit arrogant and edgy, and now
I'm still all those things.
I mean, it never goes away.
Yeah.
But when I look at you with Jordan Peterson, and you're very much holding your own, you're a very smart man. I see evolution, and I'm wondering if that evolution in how you're thinking is also having an impact in how you're reading the scriptures.
I'll be honest with you, like, I started YouTube when I was like 24 or 25, now I'm 31. So there's age, the fact that I've got a family now, I've got 3 children, stuff like that, you know, that's helped me mature as well. But also the fact that people have to realize when they look at Muslims, and this kind of goes back to perceptions, is that they're not just operating on the basis of reading their scriptures. So I'm an amalgamation of things. I'm like, you know, I'm a Londoner, someone who's born and raised in inner city London, in secondary schools and so on, where people used to fight in the classrooms, outside of the classroom. So you have to kind of develop a kind of a defense mechanism for that. So a lot of that will come out in my persona, just as it would probably in yours. You in a kind of rough environment you grew up in. So in a sense, people need to be more mature when they're doing analysis. Because is he speaking now when he's, you know, doing this or that thing on YouTube in the street, or, you know, getting confrontational? Is that as a result of his Islamic behavior, or is that because he's born and raised in this kind of environment, because he has these kinds of pathologies, because he was born and raised by a single mother, because he, you know, has this need for validation, this psychological pathologies?
Shout out to the single mothers, by the way.
Yeah,
me too, mate.
Do you know what I'm trying to say? So all of these things have an impact. So for me personally, I feel like I've been trying to manage my own inauthenticities. Like, I've been trying to be and this is an Islamic practice. It's called muraqabah, or muhasabat an-nafs, or self-accountability, which one of the caliphs of Islam, or the second caliph, called Umar, he said this. He said, "Hasibu anfusakum qabla an tuhasabu." Hold yourselves to account before you are held to account. In other words, have this self-reflective behavior. And I've been doing more and more of that. I think me and you both know that being on a social media and on the public sphere, you're going to get held to account anyway by the public.
Fucking right.
You know what I'm trying to say? You have to justify yourself. And it becomes ad nauseum. It becomes very exhausting.
That's what I've really tried to apply to this whole situation, is just get my face in the camera and go, say what you got to say. I'm here to take it. I know I fucked up and I'm sorry, you know. And growing as a person, the more real you are with yourself, the less other people's words can ever hurt you. Because if you know every problem you've got and every mistake you've made, you're not going to have that meltdown when someone gives you the home truth one day. Yeah. And I think that when you are, like, everything you're saying resonates with me. There.
For me, the biggest thing is purpose. I mentioned this to Jordan Peterson, I mentioned to you as well. It's like, I'm very fascinated with this quote by Nietzsche, where he says that if you have a why, almost any how is possible. So this strong sense of purpose. Like,
I've seen that, yeah.
If I didn't have, like, for example, this strong meaning and purpose of life. Like, for example, for me, I believe that if anything happens to me, which is like someone abuses me, someone shouts at me, someone swears at me, I believe that this is either reducing from my sins, it is purifying me from a spiritual perspective, it is strengthening me from a psychological perspective. So you always spin it in a manner which will have spiritual benefits. So it's a kind of optimism, it's a religious optimism. And if I didn't have that, I'd find this very difficult.
I want to ask you about that.
Yeah.
Imagine, right? Imagine you'd never had the Quran.
Yeah.
Right? Obviously, it's a huge part of your life and your identity now. What do you think would have became of you?
I think I would have been a very loose individual, womanizer. I think I would have been a violent guy. I think, I would have done some really wild things. Maybe I would have been in prison. Because the thing is...
Did you, just to interrupt there, do you feel those, I don't know, let's say you're 20, 25 years old, could you feel those urges and then you've got the good book on one hand that you're sort of trying to live by, but then there's that in you, the wild man? Absolutely.
And that's why, like, for example, as a man growing up, like, for example, before I got married at the age of 20. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I got married at the age of 20. Yeah. So obviously, because as Muslims, we're not allowed to have sexual intercourse before marriage. I got, married at the age of 20.
Well,
and
the way you've just phrased that, I have to interrupt. Sorry, but the way you phrased that was if to say, I really needed that.
Yes, I did. No, but I'm being honest.
I love the honesty.
Yeah,
and I think that I'm sure a lot of Muslim men will connect with that. But any religious person will understand what that's like, because we do have those urges inbuilt in us.
Yes,
and you don't want to live a life that is against what you believe in. Mm-hmm. Was there an element when you were about to tie the knot with the missus and get married that you were? In my world, it's try before you buy, right?
Okay,
you know what I'm saying?
There was nothing like that.
But was there an element of fear that, oh God, I hope this is it for the rest of my life? We've never,
because Islam is not Catholicism in the sense that, and in Catholicism and Judaism, there are very strict laws of divorce. Like, for example, in Orthodox Judaism, it's only the man that can give the divorce. It's called the get, and
oh yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, and in Catholicism, I mean, most interpretations nowadays will say that, once you've got married, that's it. In Islam, there is, if you get into a marriage, then you can divorce, either or, like a man or the woman can end the relationship. So I never felt as if I would be stuck forever. Like, honestly, I don't have that kind of mentality. And I think if we look at the early days of the companions of the Prophet, because the Prophet Muhammad, just to give you a bit of context, there's the Prophet Muhammad, right, who was a 7th century figure, who we believe is the ultimate role model, who believed that he was given revelation and so on, and that he was the final prophet of a long line of prophets. And then you have his companions, who are his friends, basically, who he taught, and so on. So we look at the Prophet and we look at the companions for inspiration. And when we look at the companions for inspiration, we look at the fact that a lot of them got married many times. So marriage was more laissez-faire than it is in current day Muslim communities. Now it's very difficult to get married and very difficult to get divorced.
Why do you think it's changed so much?
Cultural reasons, and I think a lot of it is economic. It's economic, because people have made a business out of marriage.
You're fucking right there.
Yeah. So especially, like, I'm originally from Egypt.
All right.
So most men get married at the age of 30 or 35 or something like that in Egypt. So in the meantime, the father of the girl will have to kind of offer up. You have to get her a house. You have to do this. You have to do that. So it becomes almost like it's kind of like a business, not in the sense that he's not selling his daughter or anything.
But families are sort of joining in that sense.
Yeah,
and that's like two companies in a way.
It's kind of It is like that, and so people don't want to get swindled or whatever it may be. So now. Because Muslims in the West have learned to kind of, and I think it's more moving in that direction, to just avoid all the red tape and just do an Islamic marriage. And the Islamic marriage is usually just you get two witnesses, and you give a dowry, and then the family knows, both families know, and there's consent from the man and the woman, and the marriage is done.
How much input do parents have in Muslim marriages?
In the culturally huge, it's massive.
Really?
Like like especially in the subcontinent and stuff like that. I'm from the Middle East. I'm from North Africa, but I mean they still have major impact or influence or input and stuff like that. But in the subcontinent, I think it's even more than that because of the reasons I've just mentioned. But it's certainly something which requires investigation. But certainly, marriage in those countries is not as easy as in other countries. In the West, therefore, when I got married at the age of 20, I thought, okay, this is. I've been holding myself, in that sense, and I've been.
I love the cheeky smile.
I've been completely abstinent.
What
So,
in terms of
sexually?
Okay, so
completely.
I just want to put a.
Yeah.
Not even the man on his own type deal.
To be honest with you, this is the first time I've said this, and I'll say it to you now.
Save it for me, mate.
Yeah, all right. So, but I used to get like wet dreams 2-3 times a week.
I'm not surprised, yeah.
And it was just the body's way of cleansing itself. I used to have a diary of when the wet dream used to come. I used to be quite interested in it because, in fact, I kind of miss it because it was a way that I could restrict my. Restriction is always good for the human psyche, I think. It's discipline. Like I've carried this with me.
That's one thing about Muslim people that in the last week I've done as much learning as I can, as I've said, and discipline in your culture is very respected and valued.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I have a lot of that in that sense. There's a lot of indulgence, if I'm being honest with you, and I do respect that about you.
Viktor Frankl said something very interesting. He said that when man is lost meaning, he will seek pleasure. And so, once again, when you have a deep sense of, I got a reason for doing this. I mean, the Islamic tradition, when it comes to gender relations, there are some conservative elements. Like, for example, it's even that you're trying to avoid it's in the Bible, actually, in the New Testament. In the New Testament, there's a very powerful statement. I wouldn't go as far as this, but it's like, if, your eye will be plucked out or someone if you look at the person lustfully of the opposite gender. But we try and avoid lustful objectification of women.
Okay, so when you were going through all of that, obviously, as much as you're a spiritual person, you're also in London, you're 20 years old.
Yeah.
Not only are there a lot of pretty women around, but there's pornography and there's a lot of other stuff going around.
That's right.
So were you just trying to block as much out of that as possible? Or
yeah, but when I got married, it just became from one extreme to another.
Put her down, Pat. Leave her alone. God. I mean, I really hope she's all right. Pray for her. But no, so did you avoid porn?
Yes.
Wow.
I mean, that was one of the things I had to avoid. But
I've seen an advert on one of your videos, and it might have been Ali's, and Ali is on the way, we promise he will be here, about people struggling with porn addiction in Islam and things like that, and not just men.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
It's a big thing in the Muslim community.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big thing in the Muslim community. But when I say I avoided porn, I did so as much as I could, but then obviously, be living in the West, like people will be in the classroom showing you things, magazines, these kind of things.
It doesn't even have to be porn as well, it's like movies, it's everywhere.
I actually stopped watching movies completely.
Yeah, because
I went very far, like... The way I did it was that, you had, I had social media, and it was like at that particular time, obviously Facebook and stuff, we weren't social media guys then, like we weren't doing any thing. But when a woman would put out some stuff like, see her body parts and stuff, it would trigger me immediately.
Oh, mate, you must have been a nightmare.
Yeah, so I had to delete it. I cut it from the root. The thing is, with these kind of things, you just cut it from the root. So I cut it from the root. I personally believe that
must have been difficult, because I was a walking hard on if 15, 16 years old. You're just going on the bus to school, going over some speed bumps, and you're like, oh.
No, but to be honest with you, I started this discipline that I had from this, from like, for example, sexual restriction, let's put it that way. It started to manifest itself in other parts of my life. So, for example, like I started doing my A-levels. And I wasn't necessarily like the top guy, but I thought to myself, if I'm going to be restricted in this way, I'm going to start putting the same discipline into my A-levels.
Right.
Now, when I was in school, they predicted like B's and C's for me. But because I started to put the discipline, the hard work, the same kind of things that you have to pray, you have to wake up a certain time. Like for us Muslims, we have to wake up in the early morning to pray. There's one prayer that you have to disrupt your sleep. You have to wake up, you have to wash up, you have to pray. It's a spiritual thing. I used to go to the mosque sometimes and so on. So when you have that kind
What time is this roughly?
It changes per season.
Okay.
But it's like, for example, in the summertime, in this country, it'll be like 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
And now it's like 6, so it's a good time now because you can just stay up after.
I mean, yeah, that's a lie-in for you.
Yeah. So we pray 5 times a day. so that's one aspect of, discipline, spiritual discipline. So I started saying, I'm going to do my A-levels, and I got A's in my A-level.
Damn.
All my teachers were shocked about it. And then I started going to university. So I'm going to apply the same principle of discipline. Started doing the same thing in university. Started doing the same thing in my postgraduates. And I just kept doing it.
Dude, if anyone's out there, mate, you got to stop. Just leave women alone. Focus on your studies, guys. This is the way forward.
It is. Okay, I'm not saying leave women alone, by the way. The Islamic tradition, in fact, there was a person who came to the Prophet Muhammad and he said, I'm going to abstain from women altogether. He said that whoever abstains from my way is not from me. Meaning, it's the way of the Prophet to get married. Okay, it is the way of the Prophet, but when you say get married, you're getting married. There's rights and responsibilities involved. There are boundaries in the relationship. There's a moral guidelines. There are moral guidelines. So in other words, now the relationship becomes reciprocal. There's boundaries. People are involved. It's not just you're just having sex with a woman and then leave it.
I want to wait until Ali's here because I've seen some of his opinions.
Yeah.
And this guy is fascinating, and we want to bring him in for the relationship stuff. But I do want to go back a little bit in regards to praying.
Okay.
You prayed before we started the podcast.
Yeah.
Where does your mind go, and what kind of things are you, if you don't mind me asking, because I know it's a personal thing, but
no, it's
what is it like for you when you're doing that? Because I've seen people meditate before a podcast but never pray.
So praying, the Islamic tradition says that this is something you find Orthodox Jews doing as well. Mm-hmm. They pray throughout the day, and we believe that we are a continuation from the Jewish tradition in that sense. Not Judaism, i.e. the sons of Isaac or Judah, who is one of the sons, but it's more so like Abraham, Moses, all of these people did it. So if you read the Old Testament, you'll find that Moses fell on his face, quote unquote, and prayed. Mm-hmm. You'll find that in the Old Testament. So it's not something new from that perspective. The second thing is the prayer goes in the following way. So we start the prayer, okay, and we do this 5 times a day, and we read a chapter, which is chapter 1 of the Quran, which is called Surah Al-Fatiha, the opening. And it goes in the following ways. It's very short. It goes, all praise and thanks belong to God, Lord of the worlds, the most gracious, the most merciful, Lord of the day of judgment, or the owner of the day of judgment. You alone we worship, you alone we ask for help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those who you have favored, not the path of those who have earned your anger, nor of those who have gone astray. So in this kind of chapter or this prayer that we say, we're asking God to guide us. Okay, we're asking the all-powerful, the higher force, the genderless power, higher force, not man, not woman, no race or anything. We're talking about the creator of the universe, asking for guidance, that we're asking him for help, we're begging God. And then we go down to another position, which is the ruku' position, the bowing position, and we say Subhan Rabbi al-Azim, or that Subhan Rabbi al-Azim means all praise or glory be to God, the most mighty. And then when we go on the floor and prostrate, we say Subhan Rabbi al-A'la. So the most noble aspect of our bodies, the face, is being put on the floor, the lowest part of the ground, to praise the Most High. So this is what we're doing 5 times a day. So we're humbling ourselves to the Most High. We're reminding ourselves of our placement and the...
Do you get a feeling when you're doing that? Because I watched Jordan Peterson, and you said, can I say it in the way I would normally say it?
Yeah.
And it sounded like quite nice to listen to, almost like singing. What kind of feeling does it give you when you go through that, out of interest? Is there a Zen-like feeling?
I'll tell you what it is. The Quran states, أَلَا بِذِكْرِ اللَّهِ تَطْمَئِنُّ الْقُلُوبِ, that certainly with the remembrance of God do hearts find rest. So if I had to summarize it in one word, it would be tranquility. Like, I think a lot of people want to be happy. Like, if you ask, there's a film called The Pursuit of Happiness. We all know about, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people just want to be happy. But I actually submit to you that I don't think happiness is a good prolonged state to be in.
No, it's unrealistic.
Yeah, and not just that. Like, if you think of it from a dopaminergic perspective, if you have dopamine spikes, then you're going to have crashes usually.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew Hoberman, I'm not sure if you should have him on the podcast. In fact, he's a person who speaks about dopamine and these kinds of things.
Well, I've been on antidepressants in the last couple of years, and
which ones were you on?
I was on something called sertraline.
Okay, yeah.
Not good for your sex life.
Yeah.
But
I've heard, yeah.
But
that's why I came off it, right?
I mean, you try. But the point is it made me realize, being a pleasure seeker, being someone who maybe doesn't have a lot of self-control and is indulgent, that lifestyle I was living pre-sertraline was very crazy. Like a lot of, booze and other things and women and just constantly looking for that spike.
Yep.
And it's not a state of mind you can stay in for a consistent period of time. Happiness
Yep.
isn't where you should be aiming for. It's that neutral but content
Exactly.
place. And that makes a lot of sense to me, what you say.
In fact, I think Peterson has something very interesting on this, where he talks about it from a psychological perspective. And this, so you can look at it from a biological or neurotransmitter perspective, like, dopamine having these spikes it's going to be followed by some kind of a crash. Usually that happens. Huberman speaks about this quite often. But that's from a dopaminergic perspective or from a neurotransmitter perspective. Then you have the psychological aspect. So this idea of trying to seek euphoric moments, ecstatic moments, is not something either encouraged or kind of seen as the ultimate purpose from the Islamic perspective. And so one of the great scholars of Islam, his name is Ibn Qayyim, he said that the world is like a shadow. The more you walk towards it, the more it walks away from you. So in other words, if you try and seek pleasure from something in and of itself, then you're likely to not get pleasure from it. So from our perspective, if you have a deep sense of purpose, and for us the transcendental purpose is not a material purpose, but a deeper sense of spiritual purpose, which is to worship the All High, that everything revolves around that, then you get this state of tranquility. So when I'm reading the Quran, for example, or doing what I call adhkar, which are the remembrance of God, saying things like Subhana Rabbil A'la, or Subhana Rabbil Azim, or whatever it may be, Subhanallah, glory be to God, praise be to God, I actually feel myself getting relaxed. I calm down. It calms me down. In fact, when I don't do it on a daily basis, if I don't read the Quran or if I don't do these things, I actually feel more frustrated as an individual. I genuinely, this is how I feel. I feel more frustrated as an individual. It's kind of like going to the gym. Like, I'm sure you know a lot about that. It's the kind of feeling that you're going to get, like the endorphins when you've finished your workout. If you remove that from your daily schedule, your weekly schedule, imagine the kind of impact that will have on you.
It's kind of like a spiritual workout in that sense. And kind of the way you're describing it, it's almost like if I was going to relate it to YouTube, for example, is like the goal shouldn't be getting the big views. The goal should be enjoying creating the content and the work that goes into it, I guess.
And that's the thing, like for someone like myself, I have to be honest with myself. The question I keep posing to myself is, to what extent are you doing this for fame? To what extent are you doing this for money, which is less so? But to be honest, for me,
we all have an ego.
The dragon is the fame for me, or the dragon is the recognition, the validation. I need that validation. And I would be lying to myself if I said I'm not doing it at all. That would be a lie. Or that I would be saying, for example, I don't care what people think.
When you look at yourself almost in the third person, and it's very hard to do this, obviously, but you've obviously become a massive success, and you're interviewing Jordan Peterson and
yourself now as well.
Hey, mate, you're doing all right, bro. And I'm sure you have your detractors and your real big supporters, and then there's those people in the middle. What is the broad sense of how people think about you, in your opinion?
I think it's positive. I do think so. When we talk about traditionalist Muslim community, I think it's positive. But it's always going to be the minorities that we look at. Like, for example, if you get 80%, 90% likes and great comments, you might not pay attention to that. You may pay attention to the 10% of negative comments. Yeah. And that's a part of the human psyche. It's a neurotic aspect of the human condition.
This last week is when you have a certain opinion of yourself and a wave of people come in and just say, you're this, you're that, you're the other, you're just like, am I? Like, and it's brutal to the ego, for sure.
Do you know who doesn't have that? And this might sound completely ridiculous, but psychopaths. I'm not sure if you've ever seen them in interviews. Have you seen? Like, when they say, I don't care what people think, I actually believe them.
Oh, 1,000,000%.
Like what they say.
They only care what they think.
They don't care. Like, these people, and if you're not a psychopath, if you don't have that psychopathy, and I don't think you do or I do, but temperamentally, we do care what people think. It's a natural thing. We need to find mechanisms to try and moderate that. So for me, my mechanism is, I ask myself one question. What do you actually believe on this matter? What do you actually believe? What's your belief? And so the first thing I say to myself is, whatever your belief is, do not compromise on that belief. No matter what, whoever says what. Because one thing worse than criticism is having cognitive dissonance. The idea that you have two contradictory belief systems, or you're acting a certain way and you're saying something else. That internal inconsistency produces, in the long term, a worse psychological outcome. So my first question I ask myself is, what do I actually believe? if what I actually believe is X, and I'm saying it publicly because I believe that that's the right thing to say, and there's a negative impact, then that's just a byproduct of truth, which is you're going to have to, and quite frankly, it's a byproduct of success. Because if people are not criticizing you, then you're unlikely to be a success. One scholar of Islam, his name is Sha'rawi, contemporary scholar, he said, "In lam yakun laka min al-haqidin, a'lam annaka min al-fashilin." That if you don't have people who are resentful of you, know that you're a failure, basically.
I mean yeah. I mean, you think even Drake has people who think he's like a failure, he's terrible, and he's so like it doesn't matter how successful you get. For example, Drake is an example of ultimate success right now in music.
Yep.
You're a very wise man, mate.
You think so?
Yeah.
I'm just building on the shoulders of giants. Like everything I'm saying to you is copied and pasted.
I get that, but you do it with swag, and we appreciate that. And you put your own thing on it, and I guess that's what we're all doing, isn't it? Like we're trying to learn from people smarter than us and older than us, and hopefully then we can avoid making those mistakes as we become those men, ideally.
I think that's it. And there's a beautiful verse in the Quran which says that God has made us into shu'ub wa qaba'il lita'arafu, that He has made us into tribes and people so that you may get to know one another. That God has made us basically into different colors. Another verse says different colors. Some of you are this color, some of you are that color. So you can get to know more about the human condition. And that inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, that the best of you are those who are most God conscious. And in fact, famously, because I was watching something from Piers Morgan just yesterday, in fact, interestingly, they were talking about Winston Churchill. And they were saying, there was a woman who came out and she said something like, he was a racist and all these kind of things, right? And Piers Morgan was saying like, but he was a racist, however, who wasn't at that time? And so I remembered this verse and I remembered what the Prophet said. He said, and this is narrated authentically, he said that there is no virtue over a black man over a white man, or a white man over a black man, that the best of you are those who are most God conscious. So in other words, it's a kind of spiritual meritocracy. The point is that Islam is a very inclusive religion. Not, in terms of race, religion, or even sexual orientation, whoever you may be. Although we have our stances, which maybe
when I watch one of your talks, you said it. You'd be surprised at how practical you can apply. Practically, you can. Was it practically or pragmatically?
Yeah.
You can apply Islam to everyday life, and that sort of one of my preconceptions was, oh, really? Like. To me, that it seemed like all religion to me, by the way. It isn't an Islam thing before people start getting at me. In the modern day...
No, but be as honest as you want.
The way I live my life, I always thought, is religion really made for the current day version of me that's going through problems that, obviously, all of these ancient scriptures... They're old, and I'm on friggin' YouTube. How am I going to connect these dots? So I sort of didn't even... think about religion growing up in that sense, because I just didn't think it would be applicable to me. I
think that it's probably more applicable now than ever, because if you think about what's happening in current Western societies, right? Mm-hmm. I was just looking at some statistics of divorce in the United Kingdom. It's really it's exponentially increased, like at a level which...
If you're going to be a divorce lawyer, now's the time, bro.
Yeah, do you get what I'm trying to say? And so then you have the family unit. Like, I'll give you an example. We were talking about the purpose of life and happiness and contentment and satisfaction. One of the best studies that's been done on this is one by Harvard University, which I think is the longest in terms of a longitudinal study, the longest that's ever been done, and it explored the question of what made people most satisfied. And its conclusion was, I think they had 1,000 people, and they tracked them from the 1950s, 1940s, I'm not sure, but up until maybe 50 years, 60 years, and they kept asking them questions every year and so on, and then it was analysis, layered analysis over the decades. And their conclusion after all these years was that the number one thing that makes a person content is human relationships. Like, your relationship to your mother, your relationship to your father, your relationship to your children, your relationship to your cousins, your friends, and so on. We would add to that as Muslims your relationship with God. So it's actually not the pleasure-seeking behavior. Like the best information that we have now from Western academia, I've just cited the Harvard thing, but there's also, Pew has done a study on who are the most happy people, most content people. And in fact, they saw that religious people were more content according to Pew, than irreligious people. This is according to Pew in America. I think they've done. So there is ample evidence to suggest that let's call it a traditional life where you have family, where you're propagating your genetics, where you have children, where you have good relationships with your parents, where these old school values is exactly what the human beings need today. Like, so this question of like today in modern society, religion's become irrelevant or has become not practical or unpragmatic or whatever you want to fill in the blanks. I think in reality, the opposite is true. And I was speaking to one particular individual called Nicholas Wolfinger, who's a demographer in America. And I was asking him in what context, because he's written books about divorce and stuff like that. I said, in what context is, for example, are children most advantaged? And he said, of all of the models, family models that are out there today in the modern age, the best is a traditional nuclear family with religious input. And it could be he said it could be any religion. That's what he said. I can't, put in my Islamic bias. He said it could be any religion, but there's regular practice in that religion. Because human beings are essentially anxiety-ridden creatures. And we need predictability, we need comfort, we need relationship and this kind of thing. So I think religion actually does help human beings.
I in the family unit, I completely agree in that sense. I think politically, I think some people use it in a negative way for their own means, but I think in the family unit, and I would go as far as to say that whether or not religion is the truth or not is kind of irrelevant to the point I'm making. It's about having that belief in them core values, about treating each other well and in the roles that they encourage people to have, because it does feel like, and I really want to get onto this with Ali, is there's a mating crisis right now and it's being talked about by non-religious people now, but it does feel like when you look back in history of the way people used to click up and get together and families and settle down, people are having a bit of a nightmare in London, just finding a mate and where do we fit in with each other and who does what and all of that. So, and I feel like gender roles right now are just so I'm not even talking about in Islam, I'm talking about just in London. There's a huge issue where women are overwhelmingly disappointed in men. And men don't know what the hell women want and how am I going to be a man? What kind of man do they want me to be? Because we've lost all resemblance of what men used to fit into. And I think I'm an old school guy, so I kind of know where I sit, but not every woman wants that right now. And how do you view that?
The thing is, in Islam, right, so we've got our own kind of, there's a legalistic aspect, and then there's another aspect which you call it, a psychological aspect. Yeah. So the legalistic aspect is that the laws relating to men and women in certain aspects are not actually the same. So the general rule is actually equality, because the Prophet said, "Innama an-nisa'u shaqa'iqu ar-rijal," that certainly men are equal to women. But there are certain things in Islam which a man can do that women cannot do, and vice versa. So that's the first thing. So in other words, this might be known to many of your viewers, polygamy or polygyny, the fact that a man can marry up to 4 women, whereas a woman can only marry 1 man. That a man is, for example, if there was an Islamic governance or something like that, he would be expected to participate in military warfare, whereas a woman is not. Where, for example, the man is commissioned to uphold the family in terms of protection, physical protection, as well as financial protection as well, whereas the woman is not in that sense. It doesn't mean she doesn't need to work or she can't work, but it just means that it's an obligation on a man, a husband. So
the original meaning in society today, though, outside of religion, is like equality is just equal. End of story, isn't it? And do you find that modern Muslim women are struggling with?
Yes, so not all of it's not just Muslim women. I think it's modern Muslim women and modern Muslim men. I think it's an issue because there's competing values here, well, especially in the West, and not even in the West, even in the Middle East. I'll call it a colonial discourse, to be honest with you. Like, the colonial discourse of, okay, these guys must be right because they have the world hegemonic power, but traditionally, there has been a difference in the way that we've conceived gender relations to, for example, the second wave feministic movement. We can't I think trying to put those two things together is problematic from an Islamic perspective. And there's going to be this kind of cognitive dissonance that might come about as a result of it. Because there are these things, like, for example, to be more severe about it, a man has a managerial hierarchy in the house. Like, for example, his last word is what actually is actualized. Not.
So when he puts his foot down,
that's it.
That's it.
That's it. So
is that what it's like in your house?
Absolutely, but in practice, my wife has a lot of influence and sway in other ways.
I imagine. Look, in just general houses that I grew up in Newcastle, it was like, if a woman wants that wall painted pink, we're gonna have pink walls.
We're not talking about that.
Yeah, we're not talking about the petty stuff.
No. Yeah.
But what you're saying is the big serious decisions. A man has those.
Yeah, I mean, but in practice is another thing. We're talking here in theory, because in practice, women and men have a very much. Women, first and foremost, if you have children, they're going to influence the children a lot more. I mean, Warren Farron said this very interestingly in his book, The Myth of Male Power. And this is part of the backlash literature that he put forward against feminists, which a lot of people like him and James Tooley and others have actually put forward. He said that, look, if a woman is in a company and she's now in charge, let's say she's a manager, and she's now in charge of 5 people, and then she became in charge of 8 people. In most cases, in a capitalistic society, she'll see that as an enhancement of her powers. This is a promotion of some sorts, because now you're in charge of more people. If for example, a person is the head of particularly a 7 classroom, and then they become the head of year, they're in charge of more people, therefore their powers have increased. It's a promotion of some sorts, and so on and so forth. But if a woman has 3 children and now has 5, it's not seen. Do you see? It's not seen as an enhancement of power.
Oh no, I know what you're saying.
And it all depends on how you define power. Because I like what he says, Warren Farron. He says that power is your ability to change your own situation. Because if a woman can influence a child, and she can change the situation from that perspective, and she can do so at disproportionately a higher level than a man can, which in most cases is the case, the Islamic discourse, for example, would say there needs to be a calibrating mechanism. Because she has influence in spheres that he will never be able to have influence in, because she's breastfeeding. There's a biological advantage here, and these kinds of things. So the man here is given some, let's call it checking powers or vetoing powers or something like that. So in other aspects where the whole family is concerned or where he is concerned as well, that he has a decision-making ability which supersedes that of the woman. So this is a managerial hierarchy.
Can I ask a question, though, about your life specifically?
Yeah.
You said earlier you're a son of a single mother.
Yes.
Just like me. And I wondered if watching your mother do both jobs, as it amazes me how they do it.
Yeah.
How that impacted how you viewed women, and therefore now when you're in this relationship with your wife, do you think you view it differently to other Muslim men who had both parents there, or not?
It's a very complicated question, very interesting question, actually. I've never been asked that before.
I mean, I'm pretty good at my job.
No, I mean, that's a very good question. I've not actually thought about that, in the sense that, to be honest...
Because it's impacted me, is why I'm asking.
I feel really sympathetic towards single mothers. Like really sympathetic towards them, and I have a lot of respect for them. And I feel like, in a sense, it's not in a cosmological sense, but in another sense, it's unfair the situation they're put in, because at the end of the day, and I think this is the problem with the glorification of divorce, because when women are put in that situation, like society pushes. Or let's say friendship groups, women's friends will say to them, get rid of this guy. When he's left, then people like me and you may be disadvantaged, quite frankly. I do think I was disadvantaged. I think like I said, a lot of my pathologies that may be coming out now on the social media is to do with the lack of a father figure when I was 13, 14 years old. So I do think that it puts children at a disadvantage, it put me at a disadvantage, although I had to plow myself, just as you did. We had to pick ourselves up and do it. But in a sense, it filled me with a kind of resentment
towards who?
Towards individuals that glorify divorce and breaking up families, and also in the beginning towards my own father. I'll be honest with you, and then I had to work upon myself and remove that. Now I've expunged, I think, all of that from my system. And now it's. Can
I ask you one more question about this? Because I remember trying to become a man without a man in the household.
Yeah.
And in the emotions you go through and the wrestling inside that you go through, and you try and you kind of in the dark almost, trying to figure this shit out, you know? Was there a bit of that for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, for me, when I was becoming, like, I actually became religious I actually believe I became religious as a result of a lack of a father figure, because I started having identity crisis. Who am I? What am I? What, you know?
Were you born into the religion?
Yeah, I was, but
but it wasn't as...
My mother she's a practicing Muslim. My father, he was very much a liberal, you know, like, in that sense. He was religious in the sense that he's, you know, he's considered to be Muslim, but he wasn't practicing from the beginning. So I didn't have a big, like, I could have been whatever I wanted to be, especially living in London. Like, you know, or I could have been an individual that, you know, maybe was nominally Muslim, but did other things. So I still went through a self-discovery process when I was younger. And to be honest with you, in so doing, I started asking myself these existential questions. What is the purpose of life? What am I doing? I used to have crisis. I actually had a crisis early on. I was like, what am I doing here?
How old do you think you were when this all sort of played out?
From 14 to 17.
Wow, they're big years then.
Yeah, and it was painful. It was the most painful thing. I've been through a lot of things in my life. Honestly, I've been through so much. Like, in terms of, I've had pulmonary embolisms, I've had a brain tumor, this, that.
Jesus.
Yeah. That was the most painful thing I've ever been through. The most painful thing I've ever been through is existential crisis. What am I doing here? Doubts, is Islam true? Is this... So I had to go through a process where I had to ask myself what religion was true. What world system is true?
I mean, obviously, there was a lot of years that went into that to ask you to sort of nail this in an interview like this is, you know, difficult. But was there a moment where you remember that feeling in those teenage formative years of yours where you went, this is it, this is the road for me?
Yeah, I do remember. Like, there was a time I'm originally from Egypt and Alexandria, yeah? It's my hometown. So I went to Alexandria and it was Ramadan. And it was not a matter of intellectual proof, because I was looking at that. I was looking at what are the intellectual proofs of Islam. So I was thinking, because I was exposed to them. Like, for example, there was a figure called Zakir Naik who I used to watch when I was younger. And he was a master of exhibiting the intellectual proof. What is the proof Islam is true? So he'd bring forward things like scientific things, you know, which are mentioned in the Quran, which he would say that could never have been known at the time. And he'd give examples like, you know, the Big Bang and the expansion universe and these kind of things. And that for me was okay, it was good. Like, how could the author of the Quran know this? The embryological stages of development of a human fetus, which even to this day I find quite surprising, to be honest with you, like, because it's mentioned exactly how the fetus develops. And then, you know, you have these people like Keith Moore and Canadian professors becoming Muslim because they feel like this knowledge could not have been achieved at the time. So there was stock intellectual proof which I was exposed to as a youngster in my formative years. But then for me, it was actually a matter of going back to prostration. I prostrated and I said to God, you know, guide me. Like, and it was very sincere. Like, I wanted the all-powerful, the higher power to guide me to the straight path. And I feel like something clicked. And it happened in the next couple of weeks after that moment. And it was Ramadan as well. It was a very, you know, special time and whatever. Something clicked. And thereafter, I didn't have a doubt. Like, I was so certain. And for me, having certainty about my existence, about the purpose of life, about what I'm doing here, about where I'm going, where I came from, what created me, all these things, I say this without a shadow of a doubt. It is the biggest gift I've ever been given. To be removed of my existential crisis. What am I doing here? What is the purpose of it all? Almost this nihilism that I had. Like, thinking, what is it? What is this?
I remember that feeling well.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So having that removed was the best thing that happened to me.
Can we talk a little bit about Ramadan? Because I've only been really exposed to it since Lawrence started practicing it with his wife, and he explained to me, you know, some of the things that he feels. But what does it mean to you to do Ramadan?
So Ramadan is basically, we believe it's a time. شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن. The Quran says that it's the time where the Quran was revealed, that it's a guidance for the people, and so on. So it's, first of all, the main issue with it is that it was revealed, the Quran was revealed, we believe it was revealed then. So once again, the story was that the Prophet Muhammad, he had a meditative temperament. He used to go to the cave, and then that one special night that the angel saw him, he interacted with the angel. The angel told him, Iqra, read in the name of your Lord who has created human being from a clot, which goes back to the embryological stages, because something which clings and so on. Read, who has taught human being by the pen, taught human being that which he did not know. These were the first verses to ever be revealed of the Quran. That read in the name of thy Lord who created human being from a clot, who taught human being from the pen that which he did not know. So basically, from that moment, the Prophet Muhammad would be given revelations over a span of 23 years. So he's 40 years old at this time, up until 63. He'd be given piecemeal revelations on a circumstantial basis. And then you'd have the Quran, which would emerge from all of this. And so the first thing is that we believe that the Quran was revealed on that time. Obviously, it's a month of fasting as well, which is one of the pillars of Islam, to fast the entire month. And for me, one of the most physically challenging things.
I mean, you're a big boy.
That's what it is, because I'm used to eating like maybe 4,000 calories a day. I don't know what you have. Maybe more.
About the same.
Same, right? Yeah. So the first couple of days is horrendous.
Am I right in thinking you don't have sex in this period?
You're not allowed to have sex when you're fasting.
Right. So at night time, when you break, you can have sex.
The issue with it is that we usually pray quite long prayers at night. And this is, if you look at the life of the Prophet Muhammad, this is what they did. The companions of the Prophet, they used to pray half of the night. So imagine praying for 3-4 hours.
And you're in that position the whole time.
Going up and down, and reading the Quran. The tradition is to finish the entire Quran in 1 month. Usually that's what people do. In the prayer itself.
Right.
So most mosques do that in London, for example. That's why you'll see that they do night prayers for a long time, 1 hour, 2 hours.
Would you take us to a mosque?
Absolutely, yeah. You're always invited.
I might need your protection, that's all I'm thinking.
No, you don't need anyone's protection, brother. They'll think you're my bodyguard. Yeah, so, do you know what I'm trying to say? Like, so that's Ramadan. You go through the prayers, and then you fast. So prayers and fasting. If you look at the life of the Prophet, that's what his life consisted of. Fasting.
And are you thinking of him and what he went through while you're going through this process specifically?
I'm thinking about the meanings of the Quran.
Okay.
Usually, I'm trying to think. It's obviously tiring and it's restrictive because you can't eat or drink, by the way, and you cannot have sex or ejaculate.
I seen Lawrence trying to do like shows, mouth bone dry, looks like shit. I mean, I
would never be able to do this if it wasn't for a religious thing.
Like, it's that gives you the energy to get through it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I do. And this goes back to like you commentate on MMA and stuff. Like I think a lot of the fighters, especially coming out of the Dagestan region and stuff like that, and I think they have this.
Mate, so one of my best mates who trains me, shout out to Lawrence Oswecki, my boxing coach. He was a Team GB boxer, and he said to me once, he went, I envy religious fighters because they go to another place sometimes that I just can't go to. Like, because he's like, they're in the ring. I'm in the ring thinking, I might die here. They're in the ring, like, they think God is protecting them and they're on this mission.
If you think about how Islam expanded, think about it. And this is something is usually people criticize it, but if you think about it from another perspective, you had a group of people in the Arabian desert who took over the Persian Empire and took over the Roman Empire, the two biggest empires almost the world has ever known. How did they do that? Because they did not fear death. It's as simple as that. In fact, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, who is the best friend of the Prophet Muhammad, he had a beautiful saying. He said that, "Ihris ala al-maut, tuhib lak al-hayah." That, this is a very difficult one to translate, but basically try and be nonchalant about death. Like, don't care about dying, or even want to die, like in other words, want to die, and then life will present itself to you.
You know what? I'm not a religious guy. Obviously, I've made that very clear. But the more I've felt like that as I've gotten older, my mother died when I was younger, and it definitely gave me a sense of there's somebody there waiting for me at the end of this. So if anything, I'll be reunited with her afterwards. So almost like in the way I lived my life after that became much more fearless and more fulfilling.
And that's what living is.
Yeah.
Living is, like, honestly, like, I'm not at that stage because now I'm also spoiled by the comforts of modern age. But when I look back at these particular figures, like where they're literally, they actually, to be honest with you, they want to die. Not in the sense that, I want to kill myself.
No, yeah, I know what you're saying.
No, obviously, I don't have any bombs. But in the sense that, there's a verse in the Quran that says, هَلْ تَرَبَّصُونَ بِنَا إِلَّا إِحْدَى الْحُسْنَيَيْن. That there's two good things, either victory or death. Death is seen as a good thing because you die, you're a martyr. So when you have that mentality, bro, like when you have that mentality, that is a way in which you can live a life which, to be honest with you, is the most brave potential life. Like you can take risks that you would never otherwise take because you think death is not the end, it's the beginning. I've actually been I was in trouble for saying this. I'm saying to you right now, I put on the newspapers, they call me the "We Love Death" activist. But the reason we're not saying kill yourself, we're saying that don't fear death. We're saying that if someone was being, sorry to say, sexually assaulted in the street, that have the bravery to stop that. We're saying that if you have a mentality where death is the beginning, your life will change completely, like on its head. And
I'm reminded by what you're saying. Well, I interviewed Muhammad Ali's grandson in the last year, who's a very spiritual guy, obviously Muslim young man who started his boxing career. We were talking about his grandfather, and there was a quote that I brought up at that time about Mike Tyson, Mike Tyson was talking about Muhammad Ali, and he went, Muhammad Ali, he was fearless beyond anything I can ever imagine. He was willing to die for what it meant for him. And you know, you're a combat sports fan. Have you looked into Muhammad Ali and everything and his whole journey?
Yeah.
Because I mean, I'm not a religious person. I'm watching Muhammad Ali, you know, really sacrifice himself for his people and put himself out there as heavyweight champion of the world and go, do what you want, shoot me, take me. I'm not going to be a tool for what you guys want me to be, which is basically he wanted to stand up for his people, no matter what it cost him.
Absolutely, and this is one of the famous scholars of Islam in the 13th century, his name is Ibn Taymiyyah. He was being, like the authorities at the time were saying that we're going to put you in prison. He said, if you put me in prison, you're giving me seclusion, like alone time with God. If you kill me, you make me a martyr. And if you let me free, then I'm going to continue. So there's nothing you can do to me, basically. Like, he's uncancelable from that perspective.
Yeah.
And it's that attitude towards life which gives us it's the most empowering attitude ever, I think. I think a lot of these people, like Muhammad Ali, Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think to maybe a lesser extent, more extent, we don't know. Even Khamzat Chimaev, like these guys, I think they do have that, and it's part of their culture. Even wrestling is a sunnah in the sense that the Prophet, like freestyle wrestling, was something that was practiced by the Prophet. In fact, even books were written, Islamic books were written about like why doing freestyle wrestling was something which is encouraged from the Islamic perspective. But it was a book written by a guy called Suyuti in the 9th century. It's called Al-Musara, that hastening to wrestling. And so basically this, I do believe that it's made its way into combat sports. This mentality has made its way into combat sports.
1,000,000%.
Yeah, which is why you're finding these people.
You know, when I first discovered boxing, it was Prince Nassim Hamed who was the superstar. And he was the McGregor of his day. He was far more entertaining than McGregor. He was the guy.
The entrances and the spinning and all this.
Mate, like, the man was magic. And I think he's kind of been forgotten by modern day.
He's probably one of the best British boxers of all time, right?
Mate, unbelievable. Like, and I remember at the end of his fights saying, you know, to Allah and all of that sort of stuff. And
famously, Mike Tyson said the same thing one time.
And then he said, I want to eat his children. That was like, not the most religious thing I've heard, Mike. Maybe just leave that bit out next time. But yeah, combat, isn't it interesting how I think young men, we're not feeling powerful anymore. We're losing what it was to be a man back in the day. And then you have this wave of combat sports of true alpha males who are also talking about their religion and specifically Islam. Let's be real, there's not a lot of Christian guys talking about it. It is.
I mean, but to be fair, if you look at the UFC champions, like as an example, right? Most of the champions have either been Muslim or Christian. I don't think there's many hardcore atheist champions. Like if you think about it. Like Pereira, by the way, is a Muslim. The one who just
really? Yeah.
He done his shahada. You know, he's a Muslim.
He's a massive guy.
Yeah, and you know, Jesus. So I do think there's something to be said. I'm not saying therefore there's a causation. I'm saying there's something to be said about, is it the case that religious fighters, because you're seeing from lightweight, featherweight, flyweight up until heavyweight, like Ngannou is a Christian. Now Pereira's a Muslim, you know.
But keep going back. Is it the discipline though that helps you kind of? You were talking about discipline earlier. If you guys live that way, discipline. If there's anything about Khabib that comes across as, you know, when that Khabib McGregor thing happened, I was sort of blinded by the razzmatazz of Conor McGregor. And I mean, who
Yeah,
wasn't?
you were his biggest fan, wasn't it?
Mate, it's funny that changed because when
You attacked him after, isn't it?
I did, yeah. And he was beating up old men in pubs.
Yeah,
I was like,
horrible.
I can't support this.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was like, Khabib, first language isn't my language. He's not that charismatic, and his style is very much suffocate you. It's not as dynamic as McGregor was, or easy on the eye, But as the years have gone on, you see McGregor's gone down the pleasure-seeking road. Khabib still dresses like, just a normal guy. Yeah, he's obviously got the money, but you see that, they're just polar opposites. And I guess now I look back at it and I heard a real nice quote from Islam Makhachev, who basically said, there was a time where something went wrong. We couldn't afford hotels, and Khabib just went, I'm covering everything, guys. He pays for his whole team. And, when he was seeing his dad pass away, what he's then grown into being is the father figure of all these Muslim Dagestani fighters.
Yeah.
I guess I have to take my hat off to him and just say fair play to you. Are we got my next guest? But I've been there watching a lot of your videos, mate.
Yeah.
Oh, aye. Big time.
So you're a secret fan, yeah?
I mean,
You can be honest with me, don't...
No, I swear, to get in a crowd like you do, specifically, I'm like, this guy...
Yeah.
Like, it takes a lot of energy to do that and to actually hold court the way you do.
Yeah.
Looks stressful,
It's
mate.
very difficult.
It is, man.
Stressful.
Yeah.
Especially when you go to a freedom of speech crowd and they try to kill you.
Really?
Yeah. Have you seen it? Tommy Robinson's.
Well, Tommy Robinson hates me, so I thought that would get me a pass.
He hates you.
Yeah, I thought that would do me all right in the Muslim community.
Yeah, perfect.
Because he basically wanted to come on my podcast, and I was like, absolutely fucking not. And
when was this back then?
a few years back, because he was hanging around at the Logan Paul KSI fights, trying to get any bit of clout he could, All right, welcome back to the True Geordie podcast. Extra guest, it is Ali Dawah. You were... I mean, I just have to take this on real quick. Tommy Robinson rally, what was going on there? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I think the thing is what was not going on there.
Really?
Yeah, there was a lot going on. To be honest, I treated it... firstly, thanks for having us here.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to meet yourself, your team. Really appreciate it. And I think it's important to have communication. I think the lack of communication is what causes a lot of issues, which is one of the communications I tried to have with Tommy Robinson, actually.
All right.
But he avoided it for a long time until we finally met. So
when you say met, was that let's meet up, mate, like this is, or was it more hello?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it was a surprise show up. I had to show up in one of his court cases because I was kind of pursuing him for quite a long time, in a legal way, of course.
Okay.
Because he was, harassing a lot of people, spewing a lot of nonsense, Islamophobic comments, and these things that he was saying come at a cost. It's not just someone saying something, it's like my wife walking down the road with a hijab, might have a hijab ripped off her head. An innocent Muslim man going to the mosque might get stabbed. So these comments have consequences. So that's why I was very adamant and persistently trying to find him. And I told him, like on social media, let's meet up, let's talk, let's have a debate. You claim these things, let's have a debate about it. And he just avoided it and avoided it. And I was thinking, what's he scared of? Like, if you are so adamant and believe that... Islam says, go and kill the infidels wherever you find them. Infidels being yourself, of course. And me and Hijab have something planned after. So the thing is, it was just like, okay, this is interesting. But he was avoiding it, and I thought to myself, why is he afraid? So obviously, after my confrontation with him, if I'm not mistaken, he had a freedom of speech rally. So this was open for everybody. And I thought that's interesting. I'm sure he would have no problem having Muslims there.
Well, it's freedom of speech, right?
Yeah, it's freedom of speech, isn't it? That's what the banner is about. And I knew it was a pretense. So obviously, I saw it as a social experiment. I thought, okay, look, let's try this. Okay, I'm going to get in contact with Lucy and George, the team. And I said, look, can I come and speak as a Muslim? And they were like, well, of course. And I thought, well, I admired that. I was at least they're sticking to their word. Everything was planned. My name was on there. My picture was there. And Hijab, obviously, we was like, I think it was a couple of years we got to know each other, and was working together, And he said, "Let me come." I said, "Yeah, why not?" Because it's nerve-wracking to read the speech in front of the far right. And
he's a big guy. That's a good idea.
It was a good idea. Yeah, it was a good idea.
Bodyguard.
Yeah, exactly. It was a good idea. So he came. We went there, and the moment we got there, it just started. Oh, you're not going to speak. No, you are going to speak. You're not going to speak. I'm like, making my mind up. Am I speaking or am I not speaking? And at the end of the day, where we are is hostile. At least get us to the back, where even if you're going to not allow us to speak. So where they were keeping us was as if it was intentional, like because it's a hostile crowd, So and we was just
were you a little scared?
Well, to be honest, look, at the beginning, not really. towards the end, when it got hostile, of course, everybody in that situation, is someone going to pull a knife? You know, we don't know. So the thing is, obviously, I was a bit, I don't know about him. He was like, I'm ready to fight and ready to die. But obviously...
Did you see what happened? Have you seen the video?
I haven't. No, I know. I haven't.
Yeah, so they rushed me in it, like all of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, literally physically.
Like they will be.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What? Did you have any injuries afterwards, or
No.
No,
That's how bad they were.
That's it's a big head, to be fair.
Yeah.
Take a few.
No,
And you can't miss it when
we went to court. We went to court.
Yeah.
And one of them got convicted.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you think it was that, in obviously, I can't even imagine what it's like to be in that situation. And the pair of you got bulls, right? So fair play.
Yeah.
Other than what is going on in their heads before you meet them, was there a thing that you felt was the last thing that you said before it all kicked off? Do you remember that?
To be honest, what I remember is that we was there just waiting, and then we had people come in and saying, "Oh, you this, you that." I was like, "Okay, whatever. Just I'm here to give my talk," and it was just that. And then what happened was there was this guy as tall as Hijab. And I don't know if he was into MMA or something. He was just running his mouth. So Hijab, obviously, he likes to keep things legal. He's too legit to quit. So, anyways, he said to the guy, I said, look, if you're gonna really run your mouth, let's have a legal MMA fight, well, charity, And I said that's quite creative, actually. So then afterwards, what we realized, the same guy made a phone call. When I saw the phone call, I realized the FLA, the Football Lads Alliance, or something like that, they were about to come. So when they came and surrounded us, and they were like, some of them were like nudging me. So you can see they were trying something, and that's when Lucy came and the police came, and they took us to the side of a van. So behind us is a van. In front of us are like hundreds, literally like ready to eat, like crocodiles, yeah? So they're just there and they're just spewing their nonsense. And I'm like, I came here to talk, and I was thinking, what happened to freedom of speech? I couldn't believe it. I believe for Tommy Robinson, the best thing he could have done was let me speak. Because at least he'll be like, you know what, look, we started with freedom of speech. We despise what he says. Who was it? Was this philosopher? Voltaire. He said, I despise what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. Yeah. So I was thinking, where's the freedom of speech gone?
Yeah.
So Sikh can speak. People from different religions can speak. A transgender can speak. Whoever, a Muslim. Oh, so that's when I realized, I said, this social experiment is showing me that the issue has got nothing to do with freedom of speech. It's that Muslims are not allowed to talk.
Me and Mohammed, we had a good chat before you came about his upbringing and how he became the way he was. And I am keen to get to know a little bit about that about you, because in my head, obviously, there's lots of nice, chill Muslim people out there who have the same opinions as you guys, but they're sat at home, comfy, safe. They're not trying to get up in Tommy Robinson's face. So what makes you different? Why do you feel like it is your responsibility, or what makes you confrontational in that way? What's inside you?
To be honest, I try not to be confrontational. Our message of like Dawah is an invitation for people to come to Islam. It's an invitation. You accept or you reject, it's totally up to you. So our Dawah style is not to be confrontational. But when you're dealing with different kind of individuals, with Tommy Robinson and the far right, like I've had discussion with the Britain First, I've confronted them. Lawrence Southern.
You say you're not confrontational, but you like.
I got a list. These are just 5 fingers.
There's a list.
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is, these individuals who are promoting hatred, they need to be confronted head on. Yeah, intellectually.
What makes you think that's your job, though?
Okay, good. So to me personally, when I was looking at these things happening in what was happening with the far right, etc., Muslims being abused, harassed, I didn't find a need. I don't have this Robin Hood thing, kind of like I'm gonna come. I don't have this savior complex. The thing is, I was like, I wish there is someone out there that can make these people taste their own medicine. And there was no one necessarily there. Hijab newly came into the scene after this happened. So I thought to myself, it was really frustrating. One thing I don't like is to see injustice. I don't care who it's done towards. I hate it. So when I saw no one saying nothing and these guys are just scot-free, it really enraged me. So that's when I just started pursuing them and just said to them, look, let's have a debate. Let's have a discussion. Let's have a debate. Let's have a discussion. No. Why? Freedom of speech to come and let's talk. So it was being rejected. So after that happened, I had...
Was it on camera or off camera?
On social media, because I tried to reach out to them. I think once I got Tommy Robinson's number, if I'm not mistaken. But I genuinely tried to, get in contact with him. I even went near his house, not to his house, because I have respect to his family. I went near a house, a park near his house, and I took a picture. I said, look, I'm here. And the reason I did that...
I'm sure he loved that.
He loved it a lot, actually, He was flabbergasted. But the thing is, the reason I did that is because he goes to journalist's house. He goes to journalist's house and bangs the door.
No, you did give him a taste of his own medicine.
I had to.
And I hear that.
Yeah, that's why.
And I appreciate you. Obviously, you didn't bang on the door the way he does.
Yeah.
Have you got a wife?
Yes.
Okay. Is she not worried like about your safety when you're doing these things? and stuff?
Well, of course, the thing is, we don't like doing it. Like, for example, maybe I can mention on camera myself that we've had the threats. We've had the was it called Osman warning? Osman warnings. Yeah, literally, we would at certain times, I'm not going into detail, we would take certain measures. We were told like might be stabbed. Somebody's called in a phone box.
How do you deal with that?
Well, the thing is,
I'm just asking because the last week I've had quite a few. I could do with some.
Yeah. We need to. I'm going to tell you some off camera, on camera things. Yeah.
Okay.
So the thing is, at the end of the day, you know, we're Muslims. We believe in God Almighty. So obviously, prayer is number one. You know, we ask God Almighty to protect us. So we have our morning and evening something that we recite to protect us. This supplication protect us from, because we believe in the unseen, magic and all this kind of stuff, and we believe in so those are the things that we do pertaining to that. But obviously you need to, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, you know, to tie your camel, meaning that you don't jump off a 10th floor and be like, oh yeah, God will save me. It doesn't work like that. You know, we have to use our brain. For example, I put my seatbelt on the car. I don't say, oh yeah, you know, I have full trust in God. It doesn't work like that. You have to have your precautions in place. So when we go to certain places, we make sure that if we're regular somewhere, we become irregular. Like, you know, if we're every week going to a certain specific location, have maybe extra brothers and some other measures as well, you know, that you can wear.
Okay.
And I'm not talking about firearms, by the way. When I said you can wear.
I get you.
Just to make that clear.
One of the things I really enjoyed talking to Mohammed about, which I also want to ask you about, is Mohammed described when he was a young man and how he was feeling unsure about who he was and what his purpose was.
Yeah.
And that's how he found, well, you're already religious, but obviously that was what made you more certain of it.
Yeah.
Was there a moment for you personally that made you feel that?
I wasn't a Muslim, so this might be interesting to you.
Okay.
I came to Islam 10 years ago.
Wow.
So my dad's atheist, and he has a very strong hate, a passion. He doesn't like Islam.
Do you have conflict with him for that?
Oh yeah. For the past 10 years, when I mean conflict, obviously in our religion, that Allah says in the Quran that after you show your obedience to God Almighty, worshiping Him, to be obedient to your parents. So these parents can be Muslim or non-Muslim. So you have to be obedient towards them. This is something that sadly is forgotten in our times. But there's times where, like, I've had the times where my dad slapped me in my face. He kicked me out of the house, and I know that's not.
You deserve that, brother.
I might have had that time, you know. I'm not gonna lie. So the thing is, it's when that happened, obviously, I know he doesn't come from an evil place, but he has this perception of Muslims and Islam, and so he's scared for me. So that's why he tried different approaches, tried to use intellectual arguments. Okay, it didn't work. Okay, put some pressure on him, didn't work. Oh, maybe he's just going through a phase, let him be, didn't work. So, and he was like, and I was becoming more and more religious. So he didn't like that. So, but now he's better, a bit better.
Where is it now, out of interest? Because this is fascinating for me.
Okay.
Like, what is his acceptance level at now?
Oh, it's interesting. Like, sometimes it's very interesting because, like, sometimes I'll have moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, he might accept Islam, maybe. And
he might accept.
I'm like, maybe there's a possibility. And then next minute he'll come up with something, and I'm like, wow. He'll just insult Islam and like say some really.
And how does that make you feel?
Well, it does,
because there is that conflict in the sense of, you know, it's your religion and your parent. You know, you love both.
Yes. I do, but like our love to our religion is greater, and that might sound strange to you, but you know, our religion our love to our Lord and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, is greater than our love. It should be greater, shall I say? It's something that someone can say easily. It's not easy said than done. But the thing is, it obviously it breaks you apart to know that, you know, your dad, you know, is hostile, and obviously you want the best for him in this life and in the hereafter that we believe in. So you have your ups and downs, but my mom's always been there to, like, when I used to pray secretly. He never knew. He found out after a couple of years that I pray. He actually one day he walked in. So my mom's there.
I've had parents walk in on me doing stuff. So, okay. You know, it sounds worse, but I've had way worse.
Yeah, this is a different one, yeah. So this one is like literally, and I heard my dad, but I thought to myself, you know what, how long am I going to hide it from him? I'm praying and my mom's like, get up.
Oh.
And I was thinking, nah, I'm just going to pray. So he comes in and there's awkward silence. And I can remember, I cannot explain how awkward it was and like scary at the same time. So he's there, he comes in and there's awkward silence. And then he goes to mom and goes, what's he doing? And my mom's like, and he's speaking to me, I'm in prayer. He goes, what are you doing? And I'm like sweating and I'm just carrying on praying. So can you imagine, he gets a chair and he's watching me. So I'm like, I don't know, is he there? Is he not there? Is he gone? Is he gone to, like, what's going on? So I finish my prayer and I look at him and I'm thinking, okay, it's a moment where you'll have some kind of mercy in it. Bro, he turns around to me and he goes, and by the way, like, sometimes it sounds like I'm vilifying my dad. My dad just wants the best for me. He's just any other father that wants the best. He just has fears. So he turns around to me and goes, don't ever pray in my house again. And wallah, that killed me. That literally, it's like somebody, I don't know, it really, really hurt.
Because he wasn't accepting you for who you are.
Yeah.
And any kid around the world will understand that.
Yes. Exactly, and the thing is, it's like, what am I doing so wrong? Like, what is it? So that's what, and
you were doing heroin. Fair enough.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm an addict or something, you would understand. But it was sad. But at the end of the day, he's better. He's much better now, more accepting.
Okay, so one thing that you haven't, I mean, that's very interesting, and I wonder how many other people are going through similar things. But what was it that sort of drew you to the religion? Was there a person?
Okay, so to me, personally, my story, like, for example, I come from like, before, when I used to live in London, I lived in London most of my life. I was involved in gangs and stuff, like just fighting, your typical just like fighting, getting into fights and all that kind of stuff. So then afterwards, what happened is I used to get into a lot of trouble here. I got caught walking with a knuckle duster. So a undercover officer saw it, and I was literally playing around with it. So they stopped me, they arrested me. And then my dad heard that. He said, look, you're coming. He had a business outside of London. He said, you're coming with me. I lived at a place called Grimsby. Have you heard of Grimsby?
Yep.
Yes, I believe it's one of the most racist towns in London. I mean, in the UK. Bro, I used to be called the PAKI.
Right.
And I'm Kurdish, but I'm Turkish. Do you get it? my black friends would be called that, and they'll be like, you know, we're not, do you get what I'm trying to say? So we used to get into fights, happy days. But when I moved there, my whole lifestyle changed. It changed from fighting gangs to partying, clubbing, girls, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, I would live that lifestyle.
Don't lie. No girls for you, bro.
Yeah.
But you tasted that lifestyle.
Yes, I lived that lifestyle.
And for I guess...
Yeah, and I'm not proud of it.
No, but the fascinating thing for me is obviously when I was talking to Mohammed, it was his struggle to avoid the lifestyle in the first place. But once you've tasted it, to then turn your back on it, it's almost potentially harder in some regards.
Yes.
So how was there a moment where it got really bad, or where you felt like you hit a bit of a rock bottom?
To be honest, when I was living that lifestyle, there were certain things that started to make sense to me. Like I had, like I always believed in a higher power. I thought religion are man-made to control the masses. I thought I've got no time for that. I don't believe in that. I believe there's some kind of a power. It has to
That's basically what I am, just so you know.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I was there a long time ago, and I always give this example, like I used to stare at my socks. And you might be thinking, why socks out of everything? So I used to look at my socks and I'd be like, interesting. I go, this has a purpose. This has some kind of a design, and it has a designer. So I thought to myself, I'm more complex than the socks. And I thought to myself, how can the socks have a purpose and I don't have no purpose? It just,
No, you're making sense, because I've just had a memory.
Yeah.
There's a guy I know who's a scientist who he works on human blood.
Okay.
And that's what made him religious.
Wow.
Which is so strange. I went, you're a scientist, you're supposed to be at odds with religion. And he went, when I looked at blood under a microscope, I seen a design.
Yes.
And my brain was like, there's a creator.
Yes.
Boom, that was it.
Exactly. To me, it was not blood, but my soul.
No, but the same.
Exactly.
It makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing is, when I had that realization, I thought, okay, there is a creator, but if that creator exists, then why did he put me here? It's impossible for him to be a creator that is purposeless creator. Yeah, there must be a purpose. And I thought to myself, okay, there must be a true religion out there somewhere. One of these, whichever one it is, it must be, because he must have some kind of communication. What does he want from me? Why am I even here? Where am I even going? What is all this about? It's like, we give the example, if you're in a train or a plane, wherever you met, and you've got everything you want on that train. But at one moment, you're going to be, well, hold on a second. Who put me on this plane? Where the hell is this plane going? It's all fun and good, but where am I going and why am I here? So this question made me realize, well, hold on a second. That's when I opened the Bible. I opened the Bible. I've read the Bible a lot. I was in a relationship, which obviously relationships outside of marriage are haram. You know what haram is?
Kind of, yeah.
Not permissible.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not permissible. So she was half white, half Asian. So her mum, I was very close with the mum. I used to celebrate Christmas with them, Easter with them. Just typical. I used to put the Christmas tree up, So literally, I used to read the Bible, and I was just intrigued, and I was reading, and I looked into different religions. I spent 3.5 years looking into comparative religion.
And was this in your mind of, I'm going to select one out of these?
Yes.
Or okay, so you made that decision.
Yes, I said one of these has to be from God. Which one, I don't know. But I'm just going to start my journey. But obviously the concept of one God resonated with me, because I was like, multiple gods, so which God? Did that God create that God? I was like, there has to be one ultimate power. There can't be two, So...
Just to explore that with you.
Yes.
Because you do talk quickly.
Yes. I need to slow down.
No, it's all good, mate. You're full of interesting stuff, honestly. And I'm sitting thinking here, why one and not two? Just out of interest.
Good.
What made you think that was all? And it does make sense to me, I get it, but I want to hear what you think.
Okay, so we use an argument from contingency. So this is an argument I'll try to present to you. He would do a better job. And by the way, when he told me he's coming here, I said to him, look, you just go ahead, you do a better job. I'll be honest, he'll do a much better job.
No, these are experiences people like, I don't have this, we don't have the same experiences.
Exactly. But,
contingency being
the
a
argument,
scientific term.
So the argument
right?
of contingency. No, this is an argument to prove why there has to be one God and not two gods. So this is a contingent thing. So this thing relies on something else for its own existence, right? So we have three kinds of existence. Correct me when I'm Prophet, yeah? Okay, because I learned this, by the way, this is my teacher in this, yeah? So basically, we have impossible existence, possible existence, and necessary existence. Impossible existence is, can we have a triangle circle? We can't. It doesn't exist. Okay, so we were left with two things. Possible existence and necessary existence. This is a possible existence. This could be any other way. This could have not existed, right? So therefore, what we say is that within our universe, for example, there are contingent things. These are things that rely on something else for their existence. Be it our planet, be it the sun, be it the galaxies, and be it our universe. So what we say is, exactly, even us, yeah? So what we say is you cannot have an infinite regress of dependent things, right? We're dependent. Our planet is dependent. The sun is dependent. The galaxy is dependent. The universe is dependent. You cannot have an infinite regress of dependent things. We require a necessary being, which we call God, necessary being, which is independent and self-sufficient, which gave rise to all of those.
Am I right in thinking that I watched you debate this with three?
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Those guys.
And I was keeping
the three whitest guys you've ever seen.
Yeah. They were characters.
But the point about them, that's good. So the necessary existence. The reason why we would say that there can't be more than one of them is there's a very simple thing in the Quran which says that مَا اتَّخَذَ اللَّهُ مِنْ وَلَدٍ وَمَا كَانَ مَعَهُ مِنْ إِلَهٍ, that God has not taken a son and that he doesn't have any other God with him. إِذًا لَذَهَبَ كُلُّ إِلَهٍ بِمَا خَلَقَ وَلَعَلَى بَعْضُهُمْ عَلَى بَعْضٍ. Had that been the case, each of those gods would have taken what they possess from the creation and they would have tried to outstrip one another for power. So let me put it this way. Let me put it in UFC terms, because you're a UFC guy.
I love that.
Okay, let's put it in UFC terms. Okay?
Thank you.
Now, let's assume there's two gods and they fight each other. Now, there's three options. Either they draw, or one loses, one wins, or both of them lose. Okay? If we assume that God is the all-powerful, the higher power, the all-powerful one, meaning that there's no power greater than that power. If we say that these two gods are drawing in a fight that diminishes from their power, how can a all-powerful God draw in a fight?
Yeah.
If we say one of them loses, one of them wins, once again, obviously now you have a victor and the other one is not actually a god now.
Okay.
If both of them lose, neither of them are gods.
Yeah.
So this is an exhaustive way of thinking about it. If you have one winner and one loser, that winner is the true God. Mm-hmm. If both of them are drawing, if it's a draw, then that diminishes from both of their power. If both of them lose, neither of them are gods. So in other words, it's impossible to have more than one all-powerful existence, because if you have more than one all-powerful, then it would suggest that it would go back to one of those three examples.
Like the Vikings' beliefs, wasn't it? They had multiple gods.
So I'm not sure, yeah.
I don't know how true that is, but I watch Vikings, they all talk about multiple gods. One thing that I am finding interesting is the fact that you came into the religion later on in life, and I'm wondering, what is it like for people who walk away from Islam, who are, let's say, 30 years old and one day decide, this isn't for me anymore? How are they viewed by the religion after that?
To be honest, we get this question asked a lot. Like, to be honest, they're free to, like, if they choose to leave, they can choose to. Islam is not in need of anybody. If somebody decides at a certain age that I don't want to be a Muslim anymore, good on you. All the best in the future, So it's not necessarily like, yes, you might get or you get it with every, like, if you had somebody, I don't know, who just said, I don't know,
any in-group, out-group.
Yes. There's still going to be like that. Oh, you betrayed us. Blah blah blah. Some verbal.
You hear about like Scientology though, where they're like hunting you down and make,
really?
all that crazy. Oh
yeah. So it's bound to happen. It's human nature. Something, but. And
a lot of it is depending on the country, because there's we're talking about, when we talk about Islam, there's 59 Muslim majority countries of 196 countries. And so each country has its own cultural climate.
Yes.
Like if it happens in Pakistan, I think it's different if it happens in
of
Morocco,
course, 100%, definitely.
Or if it happens in Nigeria or something.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, one of my favourite videos I used to make, and I call it a favourite. I've been doing my research, and it was just fascinating to hear you guys talking. You were reacting to Muslim women who were talking about their experiences with polygamy.
Oh yeah.
And the women who were talking were kind of. I kind of felt for them because they looked a bit fed up with it, and they looked a bit like it ain't the feeling I want of a man who wants more than one woman. They clearly weren't loving it. And if I'm right, and I don't want to quote you because you probably said it in a more articulate way than I would have, you kind of said, that's Islam. Like a little bit like, if you want to be a part of this religion, this is what we accept. And it's not necessarily there to make you feel great all the time.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yes, there's truth in that. So, in the sense that, look, I mean, there's a difference between someone not wanting to do something, an Islamic practice, and someone despising it. So from our perspective, if someone is like, for instance, doesn't want to wake up in the morning and pray, or doesn't want to protect the community by fighting the enemy, intruder to a country. These are all natural things. Most women don't want to be in polygamy. And that's natural, that's fine.
Yeah, it's natural.
And they're not actually...
If it's natural, then why do you think it's ended up the way it is with Islam?
The thing is, there's no logical principle that says that if someone likes something, that thing is good.
Good point.
Do you see the point? So the thing is that Islam attempts to solve communities and society's problems. And so polygamy is one of those ways which, we were talking about single motherhood. Single motherhood can be solved at least to some extent, or the surplus of women in the market, on the marriage market or the sexual marketplace can be removed. In fact, if you think about it from an economic perspective, think of it this way. Single motherhood is not just something which impacts families and children and communities. We know that that's 100% the case according to almost all the data. It's actually something which impacts the economy as well, because a single mother costs the economy so much money, welfare benefits and these kind of things that she would otherwise not be being paid because the father would be putting money in. So this polygamy, I think, or polygyny, because it's actually a man to multiple women. Yeah. If we consider all of you can make a utilitarian argument. You can say, look, if you look at the pros and cons and add them all up, the family pros and cons, the economic pros and cons, the social pros and cons, the community pros and cons, then there's an aggregated or an accumulative pros over the cons, for example. Yeah. So that's the argument we're making. We're not saying that women shouldn't feel negative, jealous, don't want to. In fact, in our religion, if a woman doesn't want to be in it, she can put it in her contract. In her marriage contract, so you're not allowed to do it, and she can stop it. So what I'm saying is that all I'm saying here is there is flexibility, but the ruling itself, if someone rejects it, then they have to justify why they're rejecting it, because something in the Quran. If you're a true Muslim, you have to be faithful to the Quran.
True, and another thing people miss out is this, that they make it seem as if polygyny is something exclusive to Islam. No, non-Muslims practice polygamy. Yeah. I mean, let me be open with you. Was there a moment of time in your life where you wanted multiple women in your life? No, let's be honest. Come on, look me in the eye, please. Don't turn around.
I still do, actually.
Mate, I've there's been some wild times on YouTube. Let's just leave it at that.
Exactly. So the point I'm saying is this, though. It's not exclusive to Muslims. Every man, we're talking about men. Yeah? You're a non-Muslim man, I'm a Muslim man. So the thing is, every man is polygamous by nature. What Islam does is send protocols to tell you how to do it in a proper way that you don't abuse the other wife. You know why? Because not non-Muslim men, some Muslim men do this as well. They have side chicks, mistresses and girlfriends. So Islam says no. If you're going to do it, you do it the right way. You want another woman, you honor her, you speak to her father. No, I'll get whatever I want and I'll chuck you to the side. No. You marry her, you honor her, you give her a wedding, you provide and protect for her. And I believe any woman in their right mind, if they're feminist, they will be pro-polygyny all day, every day.
One thing that you just said, and I'm not disagreeing, but I do think it's fun to explore some of these.
Please.
Is men are polygamous in nature.
By the nature, yeah.
And by that you mean men just want multiple women.
100%. That's in our biology, you know. And women are hypergamous by nature. That's in their blood.
And also, like you can make an argument because this equality premise. First of all, going back to the point, we don't believe that men and women are not equal in value. We just believe that equality in value does not mean identicality in roles. So we believe that men and women are spiritually equal there. In fact, the Quran actually explicitly mentions that. But
I've had conversations like this with women before, where I've tried to say, like, look, I'm not saying we're not equal. I'm saying we're different, and our jigsaw pieces are bringing different things to the table.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm the protector, and you're the nurturer. And that's how I'm old-fashioned like that.
No,
for an English guy.
I don't
Exactly
even think
good.
that's old-fashioned. I just look at your muscle mass. Look at the size of you. Imagine if you're with a 5'1" woman.
Are you talking about me? Or
No, but I'm saying, like, if you're walking over in the street.
If we get burgled, I'll say, you go take care of it, honey. I'll be right here.
I think that's a disparity. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Here. So what I'm saying is that when you consider all of the variables, let me give you a few studies, right? So one of them is by Baumeister and Cantonese. I think it's the biggest one that's been done, which is about the sexual urges of men and women, or sexual desire.
Oh, yeah, I've seen you arguing with someone about this.
the hijabi feminist?
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
No, on the basis that I think there is no difference of opinion here from a biological perspective, that as a general rule, men have more frequent, more sexually...
no comparison.
Yeah, it's much more pushy for a man. It's the frequency and the need for it. So that's from a sexual perspective.
Yeah.
As you know, from a biological perspective, men have 10 times, on average, the amount of testosterone a woman has. And testosterone does contribute to drive and other things as well, like aggressivity and so on.
We're better drivers, for sure. You're right.
I mean, there was actually a study. There was a study.
Yeah.
I'm not being controversial here, but there's a study done by a woman called Maguire, and I actually did this in A-level in psychology. And they what they did was they got these taxi drivers before they did the knowledge, and they done an MRI scan on all of the brains of men and women, and there's a part of the brain called the hippocampus region, and there was an increased grey matter in the hippocampus region for men after more than women after the period of 18 months.
Right, so you know what's fascinating is I watched a show once about a woman who was going through the change, and she was becoming a man, and she started taking testosterone, and she said, and I'm taking her word for it, but she said she said, my sense of direction has gone through the roof. My memory of where things are and driving in places, all of a sudden, 10 times better.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
but I mean, think of the Formula One, right? And once again, I'm not saying that men are better drivers than women. I'm saying that there are some things that men can do or have proven in driving when there is an equality of opportunity. Because Formula One, there's equality of opportunity.
Doesn't matter what you are, does it?
You can be a man or woman, and you can. But look how many women have made the top 5.
Yeah,
top 10.
We're smashing.
No, so the reason why that's the case is because there are some things: reactive ability, strength, physical strength, the ability to deal with trauma, the ability to deal with emergency situations. I feel like you can make a biological case, a physiological case, psychological case that men are better than women, or men are better in certain aspects of it.
I think people and that's where you guys, I think, do trigger some of these feminists who, as much as they want equality, what you're bringing to the table is a lot of information as to why we're not the same.
Of course.
It's not that we don't mean as much, but we're not the same.
Well, we say the biggest inequality is to treat unequal things equally. Yeah? This is what we're always saying.
Aristotle said.
That's always saying. No, I said that. Don't give it to Aristotle.
Who said that?
That's why I said, don't give it to Aristotle. Yeah, so the thing is, all we're just saying is, like, you're working as a team, and that's what it is, and they have different needs. And that's the thing. Women are hypergamous by their nature. We accept them how they are. They want a man that's 6'4". I don't know if it exists. Yeah, we've got one here.
Yeah. He's 6'4" as well.
Yeah.
I've seen him.
Oh, is he?
But this is the thing. When you were arguing with that woman who, she was a feminist but also a Muslim, is that right?
Yes. She didn't ascribe to... She has some feministic views,
Well, that was the title. It made for a good title,
Clickbait,
Yeah, it worked. And you said, look... It did make me laugh, I've got to admit. You said, if you want me to stand in front of you when we're getting attacked by some guy with a knife, then you better look after me in the bedroom.
Well, exactly. You know why? Because this is exactly what we're saying. Because remember I said, the greatest inequality is to treat unequal things equally. So the thing is here, I'm at my most vulnerable when it comes to, and with studies that show, when it comes to intimacy. Now, as Muslim men, we are not allowed to sleep around. Meaning that we even told, Allah says in the Quran, tell the believing men to lower his gaze. Meaning, if I go out and I see a woman dressed inappropriately or appropriately, I don't care if she's wearing a niqab, hijab, or a bikini, I have to look away. So I am protecting myself from that with the gaze, yeah. So and then afterwards, I'm going out working for my family, going out there. Come on, man, look at the rent price. You know how much rent price is in London? Come on, bro. And then you're going through all of that. You're coming home, and by the way, she doesn't. If she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to. But what I'm saying is, then I will get another wife. How about that? So then, oh no, I don't want that. Well then, hold on a second.
Well, that's freedom of choice then.
No, well,
isn't
no,
it?
well, that's fine. But what I'm saying is that when a man,
I would remove her from my life.
no, okay, maybe, no, maybe keep her. But,
How many times is she allowed to say no, though? 'Cause she may have a headache.
No. These are valid excuses. She was saying, you know what she was saying? She was saying, lower your gaze to your wife. Don't look at her. Go masturbate. And I was thinking, well, hold on a second. Let's reverse it. You're on the road. Somebody pulls a knife out. Imagine me saying, I choose not to defend you. I don't have to. You will be losing your mind. The feminists will be protesting in front of my house. Yeah, you coward. You should. So what we're saying
I
is,
think when I saw that video, what the response was, well, the stakes are different because the on the one hand,
but they missed the point.
The issue is not about stakes here. The issue is about vulnerability. So let's stick with the idea. The Islamic model is a complementarity model. It's a model of complementarity. There's some things that men can do that women cannot do, and vice versa, or that men can do better than women, and vice versa. Right? So the whole premise is that if we work against each other, it's going to cause problems in community and society and so on. If we work with each other as a team, which is actually another reading of the hadith, which means that you are twins. Men and women are twins. We're meant to work together in complementarity with one another. Then that brings about the best results. So, for example, I give this example.
yeah,
I think it's more of an easy one for
Digest.
people to understand, maybe, is the example of the firefighters in America. So they had this kind of obstacle course, I think it was in New York. And because of it was equality of opportunity and stuff like that, when women went through the obstacle course, they didn't complete it as much, and therefore there was a major skew in the amount of men and women there are in the fire force. Yeah, so they made the time longer so that more women would be selected as participants. But the point is if someone was in a burning building. Okay, if someone was in a burning building, and now you've reduced the time and you've made it less efficient, why should we manipulate the variables in order to try and get a better outcome, where there's so-called better outcome, or equality of opportunity, and so doing put children and men, women and children, ironically, in danger.
People will die.
So we're saying that the efficiency marker here is not really being attended to in a proper way. And I feel like if we really took men and women's strengths and weaknesses seriously as a community, society, we'd have better results.
You both debated homosexuality, and you've talked to a lot of gay people in your videos. So what is that? What does Islam say about that, and how do you guys view that in the modern day?
I think that, with homosexuality, obviously, Islam forbids homosexuality as a practice, not as a feeling, because you can say someone is not in control of how they feel in some cases, and we accept that. So if someone feels in a certain way, then it's forbidden to act upon it in a penetrative way if you're a man, so I have sex with another man and so on. Now, Islam forbids this. It doesn't mean that if someone practices it, by the way, they become an ex-Muslim or that they leave Islam or they excommunicate. They're still within the fold. It's just seen as a major sin. There is obviously
When you say major sin, are there a number of...
a hierarchy of sins.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So where would that rank?
High, very high. Like Ibn al-Qayyim, one of the scholars of Islam, he says up there with murder. It's up there.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very...
But what about a man cheating on his wife or vice versa? That's a major sin as well.
Yeah. So if a man cheats on his wife, it's a major sin. On the same level.
Is that on the same level?
Yeah, 100%. Both.
There are things that in Islam that main people will not consider. Like, for example, usury, like interest, getting a loan from the bank.
Yes.
Things like that are seen as major sins on that kind of level as well. So there is a hierarchy that we have going on, which maybe some outsiders, when they look at it, they will find it a bit strange. But having said that, the argument we put forward about homosexuality is that there's two major ethical pathways in Western ethics. Yeah, you have something called utilitarianism, and you have something called deontological ethics. Utilitarianism was spearheaded by someone called Jeremy Bentham, and then was taken on board by John Stuart Mill, and it's being kind of embedded into what is referred to now as social liberalism. Yeah. And the idea is really, it's the harm principle, which is that you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anybody else. And we're trying to achieve the greatest good for the greatest number of people. So that's one way of looking at morality, yeah? That is the way of John Stuart Mill, and it's pretty much accepted now in Western society. So when I say the liberal ethic is dominant in the West, I'm talking about these notions, that you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anyone else. Deontological ethics is spearheaded by someone called Immanuel Kant, and what he says is basically that there are some things which will always be categorically wrong. And if you imagine all of society doing it, and it leads to some kind of impossibility, then that thing is wrong. So, for example, he would say lying is always wrong and there's no justification, even if death resulted as a result of it. Lying is always wrong. These are two ways of looking at it. Now, these are the two ways that moral philosophers and ethicists in the West have looked at the world. I'm saying on both ways, homosexuality as a practice, there is aspersion cast on the morality of it. And I'll explain how. If we say, from a deontological perspective, that the things that if they were conducted by everybody, that the society would not continue, or that there'll be an impossibility in that sense, i.e. what it was referred to as a categorical imperative. That's why Immanuel Kant said lying is wrong, because if everyone did it, we wouldn't be able to function as a society. He said suicide is wrong, because if everyone did it, we wouldn't be able to function, there'd be death. Then by the same token or by the same logic, then homosexuality would be wrong, because if everyone did it, then, so that's the ontological route. The more popular route, which is the utilitarian route, or the, if you like, the liberal route now, which is the greatest good for the greatest harm, so long as you're not harming anybody else. We would say there's actually aspersion cast, first of all. How do you prove that the harm principle is true? Yeah. Is there a scientific way that you've come to prove that the harm principle is true? Secondly, even if we implemented the harm principle on homosexuality, the question would be, could you make an argumentative case that it actually harms more people by way of disease or by way of contraction of this, or as we know from the NHS that homosexual sex is more likely to spread certain diseases and so on. So could you make a communitarian argument against homosexual practice? We would argue, yes, you can. And even if you argue on the basis of families and so on, we were talking about the stability of certain families. I would postulate and I would argue that actually all of the data, almost without exception, has shown that homosexual relationships, man, man, woman, woman, disadvantages the children more than a nuclear family. In what sense? In the sense of the child is more likely to be to include themselves in delinquency, the educational level is more less thing, they're more likely to have psychological pathology, and so on. So even on a utilitarian basis, we would say that the traditional family setup is superior to the homosexual lifestyle. On those two grounds, if you're looking at it, even from the Western lens, we're not even saying from the Islamic lens, because all we have to say is that God said so. But we're not going down that route. I'm saying that if you look at it from a utilitarian lens or from a deontological lens, both would point to the same reality.
But do you think you're reverse engineering a little bit of this and trying to sort of make it more palatable for, when you're getting challenged on it, a sort of thing?
All I'm doing is I'm using the ethics which are seen as the most superior ethics in the West, to show you that even based on those ethics, that you can make an argumentative case against the practice of homosexuality. I've
got a question then. Do you guys, and obviously you don't have to out anybody, but do you know any homosexual guys in Islam?
Yeah, actually, I had a discussion with one. He came to the park, and it was very profound, because he came and said, I have these tendencies, but I don't act on them. And he actually blew me away. I was like, wow. Like, he was like, I just use this because he was like, I know that obviously I can't get married. Because in Islam, a man and a man's marriage is invalid. So he was like, I would use this time to get closer to God Almighty. And I thought to myself, it's an interesting way to deal with it. Because, Allah says in the Quran, have you seen the one who takes his desires as his own God? This is very interesting. Because the thing is...
so he's not going to have any partner, not a woman, not a man?
No, he's not. So this is what he said, by the way, yeah. And he said, I would use this opportunity because when you get married, as he said to me, as a your wife, you're going to be dealing with that, and you're not going to have time for God. I will be having all this time for God. And I thought to myself, that's interesting, because the whole point we're here is to have a relationship with God Almighty. Obviously, we are allowed to get married. He's not. I understand that, but the fact that he's sacrificing that desire for God Almighty, that is the sole purpose we're here.
Is that what nuns do?
Kind of, but
in that aspect, yes.
They're abstinent completely. Okay. Depends on the denomination, by the way. Like Anglicans, they don't do that no more.
Yeah, exactly. So the thing is,
I wonder how many Muslim people, or men rather, are hiding in wedding, in marriage.
It can be, but you know what's really interesting? Yeah, there's just a rewind to I said I used to go clubbing, partying, etc. I think this is where the discussion will be very interesting. Yeah, why? Because I used to live this lifestyle. It didn't bring me happiness. Mm-hmm. And I believe a lot of people that live this
What
lifestyle.
lifestyle are you talking about? Bro? Like, if
I
people
don't
get
wanna-
confused.
You know what I was talking about. Okay, yeah, clubbing, partying, all this kind of stuff. Okay, so the thing is,
I really wish we could have like a cut in the edit right now and just have him like glow stick.
so the thing is, that lifestyle, I realize it does not bring me happiness, and it will never bring me happiness, because the way God Almighty has created us is that Allah says in the Quran, you will only find happiness in the remembrance of God Almighty.
Okay.
And if you forget His remembrance, you live a depressed life. Meaning what? We all want some kind of a purpose. And then what happens is, the way we are created, we have something called the fitrah, our innate disposition. We are created as if, like, imagine somebody programmed a robot to only find, not that robot can feel anything, but with a specific thing, by giving it, I don't know, argument said, giving it a hat. It's just that's its most happiness when it's most happy. The thing is here is that anything that I chased, I was never happy. Anything. I used to do bodybuilding, I used to go boxing, I used to do all this kind of stuff.
The look of it.
And there was always, you don't have to take my shirt off, I don't want to embarrass you. So the thing is here is that I realized that it doesn't bring me happiness.
Well, I've got a question on my life based on what you're saying.
Please.
So I drink a lot,
Yeah.
especially in the last 7 days, and I smoke weed, and you know, and I've certainly I've not exactly been the most strict guy with myself,
Yeah.
and it doesn't bring me happiness necessarily. Although in that moment it
Yes.
certainly feels all right, but you know,
Yes.
the hangover and whatever else.
Yeah.
You guys have obviously avoided that, or at least you have
Yeah.
for a long time, and you have recently.
Yeah.
But you know, when life gets a bit too much, and you know, you need a vice, or and sometimes our consciousness just needs an escape.
Yes.
How do you combat that? What do you do?
We escape to God. That's what we do. We escape. The thing here is this: alcohol, weed, women, men, opposite gender. Nothing is going to make you happy. Period. Except because what I'm saying is the way we are programmed. Look, we all eat food. Okay, you're not going to go and drink something that's poisonous. You're not going to go and have bad food. You know why? Because your stomach will reject it and you will vomit it. This is a physical law God Almighty has put in place, that when you eat something which is not good for you and your body, the stomach automatically takes it out. The soul is the same way. The soul wants the remembrance of God, and I'll come to what that means. When you give it girls, like this is what I used to do. Okay, have girlfriends, not happy. Cars, not happy. Money, not happy. Holidays, not happy. And I was thinking, what does it want? The soul wants the soul food, you know, literal food, which is what? The remembrance of its Lord. That's where it's connected. That's where it's at home, truly. And if you look into the Quran, God Almighty always says that you will return back to me. Let me ask you a question. Where are you most comfortable in your life? For example, is this, by the way, do you live here?
Yeah.
You live here. Okay. This is your house. Yeah. You know, like they say, sweet home sweet home. Yeah. The house is the place where you're most comfortable. You can walk naked. Literally, it's your space. You can do whatever you like.
I've sat in that chair naked before.
Thanks for telling me that. We'll have to.
I haven't, I promise.
Yeah. So the thing is here, at home you are the most comfortable. Yeah. Now God Almighty, for us, is our most comfort is when we return back to Him. That is where our comfort. That's why when we come to this life and we're like, why doesn't things go smooth? Why is things not perfect? Because you are not home. You are not home. So what we're seeing is that when you realize, and I came to that realization, I thought to myself, I'm chasing this lifestyle. And I always give this example. I used to go clubbing and I used to wear a specific jumper that I believe I looked really handsome in. Like I believe that,
I
you know.
love that.
You know,
I just love how we've got into this.
Yeah,
I love that.
So the thing is, I used to wear specific clothes, work extra hours to live a certain lifestyle. I came to the realization, I thought to myself, before I came to Islam, I thought to myself, these are my masters. That jumper that I hate wearing, but I wear it because I look good in it. Just as a woman who wears this much heels, even though she's uncomfortable and her feet, her heels are bleeding, she still does it. Why? Because I look good in it. So I thought to myself, please.
Sorry, I interrupt you. I watched one of your videos about Kim Kardashian, and
Yes.
you were kind of talking about
Literally.
about the way she presents herself and
Yes.
how misguided she is.
Well, she's willing to eat poo just to look young. And I mean, if that's not enslavement, I don't know what enslavement is. So the point I'm trying to say is this, yeah, that we are bound to be enslaved to stuff, yeah? And another philosopher, I forgot his name, I got the reference here, that Google, man is born free, but in shackles everywhere. Is it the same guy, yeah?
Rousseau.
I need to remember that. Yeah,
nice.
man is born free, but in shackles everywhere. Exactly. Did you choose your name? Did you choose your parents? Did you choose your sister? Did you choose if you have a sister, I don't know. Did you choose the way you look? No, you didn't. So nobody can come and say we're free. We are not. We are shackled somewhere. Now, what does Allah say in the Quran? He says, have you seen the one who has one master and multiple masters? Would you rather be enslaved to multiple things or one thing that is deserving of your worship? To me, I came to the realization and said, hold on a second. If God Almighty exists, which I believe He does, and I found it through Islam and Islam to be the truth, I would rather be enslaved to Him Rather than being enslaved to my jumper, to the opposite gender, to the money, to live in a lifestyle that is fake. And I found my true freedom when I enslaved myself to the one who created me. Because I believe he's deserving of worship and I believe he created me. When I die, all your friends that you have, me and back then, yeah, best believe, how long are they going to cry for? I bet you they're not going to cry for one day. They're going to forget you. They're going to backbite you. They're going to talk ill of you. Yeah? And I came to a realization that I have to prove myself to nobody but God. And I swear to God, when I accepted Islam, it's as if a mountain went off my shoulder. You know why? Because I didn't care about who thinks what of me. Oh, what car do you drive? Bruv, I drive Toyota Prius. Yes. I'm shy if somebody sees me. Oh, I need to wear branded. I don't care. And this is where true happiness is found. This is what I believe when I talked about the soul. Your soul wants the remembrance of God. And what do? We give it alcohol, weed, opposite gender, whatever it may be. And then the soul is saying, I don't want it. I reject it. I reject it. I reject it. And the moment you give it the correct food, it embraces it. And that's where you find happiness. That's where I realize, I know why I'm here, I know where I'm going, I know my purpose, and I know where I want to be. And if you don't have that in your life, it's like the wind. On a windy day, you're like a leaf. Wherever the wind takes you, you just end up there.
I kind of feel like we should just almost finish it there, because the way we started was kind of Mohammed saying a very similar thing about how do you know where you're going and all of these questions that you have, and you've come at it from a very similar angle. I do want to ask you one final question, and you can answer together individually, because it's how I like to end all my podcasts. How would you like to be remembered?
Start with you, bro.
Man, I will start with you, brother.
Take your time, because we can edit this bit out.
Yeah.
Okay, no.
I want you to think.
I actually think about this quite a lot, I'll be honest with you. Because there is a prophetic saying where the Prophet Muhammad said, يَنْقَطَعُ عَمَلُ ابْنِ آدَمٍ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ, that all of the deeds of human being is cut except for three things. عَمَلٌ صَالِحًا وَلَدٌ صَالِحًا يَدْعُ لَهُ, a child who is a righteous child that will make supplication for them. صَدَقَةٌ جَارِيَةٌ, a continual charity. And عِلْمٌ نَافِعٌ يُنْتَفَعُ بِهِ, a beneficial knowledge that people will benefit from. Now, what I want to do before I die is I want to have something left behind for the people that they will benefit from. It's not about how I want to be remembered. It's about what I'm going to leave behind will be used for. There's a beautiful verse in the Quran, yeah? It's in chapter 13 in Surah Al-Ra'd, which it goes like, the part of the verse is like this. أَمَّا الزَّبَدُ فَيَذْهَبُ جُفَاءً, as for the foam of the sea, it just evaporates. وَأَمَّا مَا يَنْفَعُ النَّاسِ فَيَمْكُثُ فِي الْأَرْضِ, as for that which benefits the people, it stays on the earth. Like if you think about all the inventions of humankind, necessity is the mother of all invention. Most of the inventions that we're using now have actually been created or invented in the war period, because you need to have like a phone, you need to have this, you need to have that. So these things, because people they were obsessed with creating things of use. I actually heard Kanye West saying this in a recent interview. He was saying, I don't want to be remembered. He was asked the same question. He goes, I don't want to be remembered. The person who done the lamppost was not remembered. This one, that wasn't remembered. But what they have in place is used. So for me, it's not necessarily about me being remembered as much as it is leaving something of use for people to use. Because in my opinion, when I'm dead, three things will continue. My progeny. We talked about propagating your genes and your progeny. So I want to teach my children so that they can continually pray for me and remember me and so on. Number two is a continual charity, which means it's not a charity that ceases. So for example, a water well or a school or something like that. Something that when I'm dead, because a statue is not going to speak. Do you know what I'm trying to say? People want to be remembered in the form of a statue or something like that. No, a statue is not going to speak, but a school is going to produce people who are going to speak. Do you know what I'm trying to say? So I want to have something like that, continual, that I started this up. You know what I'm trying to say? And I continually get in the reward for that after I'm dead. And thirdly, and I would say most importantly, I want to have something that I've left behind that people will continually use, say, reference 100 years, 200 years, 300 years after my death.
Someone's going to be quoting you one day, mate. You got an answer, bro?
Yeah, myself personally, I believe personally, it's this concept of people remembering you. People are not going to remember you. And even if they did, I don't want it. Because the thing is, one thing that I found really beautiful in Islam was loving for the sake of Allah. Now, what does this mean? I couldn't get my mind around it. I was like, what does that mean, loving for the sake of God? Can I not just love someone because I love them? And then I realized to myself how selfish human beings are. The moment, whoever your relationship is with, yeah, there is terms and conditions. You like it or not. I like this person because of da-da-da-da-da. Because they might offer me something, I'll benefit of them, etc. So like, for example, a lot of people, when it comes to like, they say, oh, clout chasing, etc. He contacted me and he said, True Geordie wants to on the podcast. And I said to him, you know what, bro? You're the guy for the job. Go ahead. Why? Islam taught me this. You know why? It wasn't, oh, True Geordie's podcast. Oh, I can get more clout. Bro, like even today I came late. You know why? Not that I couldn't be bothered. I really wanted to meet you, but I didn't need to be on camera. I don't need the clout. The thing is, the reason I'm saying this is because when you love someone for the sake of God, what that means is, for example, if I lend hijab, let's say £5,000, and I'm there for him all the time. One day he turns around and he spits in my face.
Me and your dad will do it.
So imagine, yeah, and then you've done all of that. Now deep inside, I'll be like, and this is what Islam tells you not to do. Oh, but I did this for him, but I did that for him. I did all of that for the sake of God. Even if you come you come and like slap me or whatever it may be, you know what I'll say? I will do the same thing again, knowing if you did this today, because I didn't do it for your pleasure. I did it for the pleasure of God Almighty. So what that means is my reward is with him. But the moment you reduce it to, oh, but I did that to you, I gave you that money, I don't need none of that.
The last 7 days of my life, been quite a lot of those feelings about people around me, of feeling a bit left down, and people who you want to be there for you in your time of need.
You see it. But who was there?
You make a great point there.
Yeah, the thing is, Allah says in the Quran, we send the smaller calamity to divert a bigger calamity. The bigger calamity is that we believe there is judgment day, there is hellfire, there is heaven, and the God that we worship is not a God that wants to throw people in hellfire.
But in this sense, that this scenario that I'm going through is revealing who's really loyal.
Exactly. But is it a calamity? Yes, it is. But it might be a calamity
that might change your... people who don't have my back.
Exactly. But what does that show you? It shows you again that nobody is there for you truly except the one who created you.
I think you're both coming from the same place, and I really respect that.
Which is Islam.
but also being selfless and giving.
Yes.
And I think that's something that we can all connect on, because for me personally, while I'm not a spiritual guy in that sense, at least yet, mental health is my thing, and that's what what I want to help and leave behind.
Beautiful.
And yeah, I really enjoyed this, guys. Honestly, thanks for your time.
It's a pleasure.
We will be putting the links to both of these guys' channels in the description below. I've got no doubt, especially because some of the content we've described that's on your channels, they're going to want to check you guys out. So do check them both out. Subscribe to them both. Go and check them out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next podcast. Cheers.
Thank you.
Well done, guys. Loved it.
Thank you very much, bro.
That was such a fascinating chat, honestly.